Any other questions?
With that, I'll move that we approve the 2011 annual audit report.
Second.
Hearing a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Okay.
Commissioners, the next item is the audit of. Go ahead, or do you interest?
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's the audit of a Region 6 office, Lampasas, which we did as of October 14th, 2011. We evaluated the Region 6 office, Lampasas of the Texas Animal Health Commission on page 1. With respect to reliability and integrity of information, compliance with rules, policies, procedures, laws, regulations, safeguarding of assets, efficiency and effectiveness of the operating procedures. As of October 14, 2011, the results of our test disclosed generally the systems are functioning adequately and are reliable. We commend the Commission and the Region 6 office staff for these efforts. However, we did observe some opportunities for enhancing the operations. If you go to page 3 of the report, there's internal audit report section. We're saying here that generally the Region 6 office is operating effectively and efficiently. It's in compliance with the Commission's policies and procedures, provides accurate and reliable information, but the region should enhance its process of verifying e-permits by having each assigned inspector sign the verification document on a consistent basis. What we found was that we selected a sample of e-permits and we tested for verification, and we came across an item whereby it wasn't actually signed by the inspector that did the verification, just to provide evidence that it was done. But, other than that, everything is fine. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
I move that we approve the audit of Region 6, Lampasas.
Since that's my region, I'll even second it. Did a good job.
I hear a second. Do I, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. But if I'd have known it was your region, I wouldn't have made the motion. Now you tell me.
All right, I think that's... Rufus, I want to thank you and your staff for all the work that you do. I know that this is very informative to us. I know sometimes we go through it pretty fast, but you do a real detailed job, and I want to thank you for your time and your work. So I think as we follow up on these issues and everything, you'll keep us appraised of what's going on. And I think you said the key thing a minute ago was the if you find something significant, but I've found that if you do find something significant, the Health Commission will jump on it very quickly and take care of it immediately. So that's one thing that I'm very proud of this commission. So anyway, again, thank you for your work and your time. Any other comments from anyone? Any public comment? Hearing none, do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second it.
Before I get started with item 2, approval of the minutes, I'd like to welcome a new commissioner, Mr. Brandon Bauma. Brandon and his family have dairy operations, farming operations, and feeding operations in the Plainview and Hale Center area. Brandon's taken the place of Rita Dice, who was here for 8 years or longer, 12 years, and did a fantastic job for her industry. So again, we welcome Brandon, representing the dairy industry. Brandon, welcome. I told him he had a 30-minute speech to give, but we're going to skip that.
Thank you. We don't have time today.
Okay. So on to item 2, the approval of the minutes of the 381st meeting. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, before I make the motion, I would just like to say I have observed from the time I've been on this commission, we get these minutes and these books before the meeting. And we deal with them all through the meeting, and they are so well done. And somebody here does that, and we take that for granted, and I don't know who does that, but I want to say something good about whoever puts our information packets together, because they are first class.
Thank you, Carol.
It's the village.
I move that we approve the minutes of the 381st Commission meeting held on September 20th, 2011.
Second it.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the 381st meeting. Is there any discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to item 3, the Audit Subcommittee Report. Commissioner Simmons.
On our audit committee this morning, we had approval of the annual audit report for 2011. There's still several items ongoing that are in various areas. They're in your book, and as Mr. Rufus indicated, that this audit report they will cover these other areas. So it's ongoing. We had an audit of Region 6, Lampasas. I think there was one item in there that on some verification of some permits. So they do a very good job for audit, and with that, there was no other comments, and ask for approval of the audit subcommittee.
Second it.
Been moved and seconded. We approve the Audit Subcommittee report. Is there any discussion? None, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Ellis will give us a report of the Executive Director and approval of waiver request for the period 9/21/11 through 1/24/12. Dr. Ellis, good morning.
It says do not move the mic as I was moving the mic. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Welcome. Glad you all are all here today. I'm going to give you my report and then be glad to answer any questions afterwards. And we'll start off again with budget issues. And as you can see here, I put the agency fiscal situation down for you all to see. And really not a lot of changes there from the last meeting, in that we're still, the big unknown for us is what the USDA funds are going to be in the next fiscal year starting, well, their fiscal year started in October, but we won't get the funds that they're going to share with us until April 1, and we're still working through our work plans, and our staff's working diligently to prepare those, and I don't think they even know how much money they have yet. So. And the second unknown in our budget is fees that might be collected. We are obviously seeing the fee increase for the health certificates. That happened and is working seamlessly. Some other fees are yet to be determined, such as the lab, the fees, the revenue for laboratory testing on brucellosis, and the management of certified free herds and the deer inspections. So far, coming in under projections, but we weren't going to balance our budget on that anyway. It was just going to be a little extra. And then probably the most important thing to remember is that the fees that we thought we were going to get as an agency that y'all passed, so far the comptroller has not agreed to give us that money. And Dr. Cochran and I were on a conference call yesterday with both LBB and the comptroller's office, and they are having an illegal interpretation of the wording of our rider, and the comptroller's office has not determined that the wording indicates that the commission was supposed to get the money. And right now they're sweeping it into the Treasury, and the intent was for us to get the money, and we've gone back to the LBB who actually wrote the rider, and they're going to work with the comptroller, but we are 6 months into this year, and we have not received an indication. Have we not only not gotten any of the money, we're not being told that we will get the money unless someone higher up makes a determination that the commission is supposed to get the money. Right now our fees for this year are $169,000. We were authorized for up to $4.9 million. So What their position was initially is that they expected us to raise $4.9 million, and since we didn't, they're going to sweep it. I think we'll resolve this, but I do need to tell you this is a work in progress, and at some point it will exceed my pay grade if they continue to have doubts about who's supposed to get the money, the Treasury or the Commission, for fees collected by the Commission. So that is of concern. I mentioned it to y'all last time, and I'm more worried about it now just because we're 4 months later and we still have no resolution.
Dr. Ellis and I have talked about this situation specifically, and it may involve maybe some commissioners getting together to visit the comptroller's office to maybe get this resolved.
And I hope there's not some legal problem with the wording of the rider. The rider, again, is written by LBB, and as we talked with our analyst for the last session, she indicated yesterday that was not the intent. It was supposed to be the Commission's money. So hopefully we can get this worked out. But if this next Commission meeting is still like this, then maybe it's time for, as you said, for some folks to visit with them. But, you know, I don't even know what to say past that.
Ernie, I'd be glad to be on that. Go talk to them. I'm very close to friends with Susan Combs, and Hubert, who is her second in command there, is a local boy from our area. I do vet work for his family, know him very well.
Good.
And, you know,
I'd be happy to go.
be glad to go to the top and help, you know, see what we could do.
Okay. Then I already have the group we need. So Dr. Ellis will let us know if that's necessary.
I'll let y'all
know if that. Let us know if that's necessary.
I'll let y'all know. Hopefully we can work it out at the staff level.
Okay.
You need to be aware of that. The second round of reductions in the agency personnel was completed in December, with the exception of a couple of retirements. We did take some retirements into account in lieu of some reductions, and so we have a couple of folks that are going to retire at the end of January. But for the most part, we're down to what I hope is the last set of reductions. The agency's at about 130 folks right now, down from a little over 200 this time last year. We are watching our budget very closely. The problem is the federal money is still unknown what that's going to be. The fees, we're still not sure where we're going to be on the fees. And and then we have just anytime you write a budget, there's a number of assumptions that are put into there, and Dr. Cochran may not want to elaborate on this, but you have to guess in advance. For example, lump sum benefits when people retire, we have to pay out annual leave, you know, the different things. So, for example, we have about $250,000 budgeted for lump sum benefits. Well, obviously last year that wasn't enough with the reductions. Hopefully this year will be less, but we probably have $200,000 to $400,000 that you get down to the wire before you realize it was enough in travel, or it was enough in the benefits, or it was enough in this or that. So we've got some wiggle room. Next summer we'll come back. Right now we're probably a little bit over budget for the next year, not this year, but the next year. And hopefully we can manage that through efficiency and effectiveness without any more reductions. And I've told our staff, as far as I'm concerned, right now we are finished with reductions in force. And I hope that to be the case, but we will watch this closely moving forward. And we will give out some pay raises this spring for the people who are left. It's been at least 3 years that anyone's had a raise in this agency, and so we're going to give some raises. It's important we retain the folks that we have left. They're good people. We want to keep them. Strategic planning is the next item on my agenda to discuss, and it's just I'm going to work closely with the chairman. Every 2 years, the agency's supposed to write a strategic plan, and sometimes in the years past, this has been more or less a rubber stamp, or just look at the one before and kind of roll it over. And I think it's obvious that things are changing for the commission, things are changing for the Texas livestock industries in general, exotic livestock, horse industry, and so we're going to really take a close look at what our skill sets are, what we bring to the table. I'm reaching out to some other state agencies. I think y'all saw an email. I want to work closely with AgriLife. Veterinary outreach is something we believe we can help with, help to educate the public. The cervid industry, the equine industry, small ruminants. Lots of things going on out there that are vying for our limited staff time, and so we're going to do our best to try and think about what we can do best and bring that to the table. And Chairman Morales and I have had a number of discussions, and we'll continue to discuss direction of the agency moving forward. Next up, public information, and as the meeting goes on, if you want to scroll to the back and look at this, I asked Bonnie, our public information officer, to put in there, y'all see the press releases we put out between each meeting. Also a couple of pages, just some copies of our social media efforts. I'm real proud of what she's doing in regard to making the face of the agency accessible and transparent and clearly understood, and it's an everyday challenge for us to make sure our website looks right and we have the current information, and Facebook and Twitter and emails and press releases, and it's something that we actively are spending a lot of time on, and we talk about it, and I want to thank her for all her hard work. And one example of some of the things we're doing, I think, is where is Bonnie? Later today, do I have something with Farm Bureau later today? We're going to start, we talked with the Farm Bureau folks, and I'm going to start doing a regular news press radio piece with them every couple of months, not just when there's a problem, just on current events and things. And so we're going to have a regular spot with them to share information on behalf of the commission. So I'm looking forward to that. And so we're trying to move from just putting out fires and do a little more preventative medicine and just give information and things of help to the veterinary community and to the livestock community. So we're spending a lot of time thinking and talking about public information. I think it's critical to the agents, the face of the agents. Moving on to the next page, brucellosis, you know, and not a lot to say there. Finally, the cattle market, the volume broke right before Christmas. The drought kind of backed off, and the seasonal things went on, and we're still having a lot of cattle tested in markets. Not as many, obviously, there were the last summer. And we're still finding traces and working through those, and on probably not a daily basis, but on a weekly basis, we're having slaughter reactors that we look for, and still no infected herds. We're still working closely with USDA. We're using their partners to help us more and more in field activities as we reduced our field staff. So we're getting some of the veterinary service folks involved, and we're still bleeding some cattle and doing some work in the field on brucellosis and trying to help the producer get out of any jams they've had, whether it's due to swine brucellosis or some other non-specific bug that's tripping our tests or is the real thing, and we're going to continue to look for brucellosis. The tagging rule that you're going to consider later on is in the brucellosis chapter, and part of that was for just the structural convenience of a rule change. We needed to change the rule anyway. Y'all need to change the rule requiring a test, and so that was so you're going to vote on a rule that formalizes the decision that was made last summer to no longer require a change of ownership test for brucellosis. And in that same little paragraph is the proposed rule for tagging, ear tagging, and basically what the rule is going to say. You don't have to test your cattle anymore when you change owners, but they need to have a tag in their ear. Basically, it's that simple. And the commission can determine what's an appropriate tag. So that'll be under the brucellosis rule later on, and I'm sure I'll be able to answer some questions as we get closer to that at any time. Moving on to animal disease traceability, the USDA proposed rule came out. They've taken comments, and now they're in that quiet period where they're evaluating and digesting what it says. We don't know how long they'll do that, but behind the scenes at the agency level, we are busy in disease traceability for a number of reasons, and as you can see here, part of it is USDA has, they're in a transformation on their computer systems, and they're kind of moving forward from the old brucellosis testing databases and trying to move forward. And one of the decisions the agency had to make was on the software side, was we had a couple of choices. USDA is moving to a new database, so to speak, for recording information. Short term, it's just a transformation. Long term, does it fit in with the animal disease traceabilities we think it's going to be implemented? And so we picked a vendor. We had to pick a vendor. Basically, there were two camps. About 35 states went with the vendor that USDA recommended. It's called Trace First. It's a company out of Ireland. They put Texas off till last, and they are in the process this month and next month of moving all our old historical test information from an old computer to a new computer. And there's over 20 million, my understanding is 20, 25 million data sets in there of test results. And we obviously don't want to lose that. And so they put us off till last, and I asked them to do that. They started with the little states and got all their bugs worked out the best they can, and they're working on our volume right now, which we're bigger than probably the rest of the United States combined for ear tag information, test information, vaccination information, TB test information, swine disease test information. You can imagine over the last, I think it's been about 25 years since they started the computers, and so they're trying to move that all to another computer. Basically, we said, hey, why don't you leave the old one running for a while? We're still putting data into that. Before you close it, just leave it where we can get into it. And so they're going to run dual systems for a while. And so that's taken up a lot of our time. Simultaneous to that, the agency was asked to put in a 3-year roadmap for traceability and management of these data systems. I've got copies if any of y'all want to see it. I've probably emailed it to you. It's, I don't know, 10 or 15 pages long. And it's a little difficult because we had to look ahead 3 years. And one of the things that we did have to determine is the software company and the system for the transformation of the brucellosis testing, will that take us to the next level in the national disease rule as far as managing interstate movements? And we believe it will. And so we actually had to write down how are we going to do that and what's our plan to move forward and manage interstate movements as the proposed rule requires, and then meet their specs, so to speak, on quick traceability. And so Kenny Edgar and Dr. Cochran, our folks involved with that, have spent a lot of time writing the national report, the state roadmap, and we're still plugged in, and there is a little bit of a vacuum of information right now coming out of USDA. But we anticipate probably by next fall they're going to come back out with the rules as go forward, and we hope our roadmap is going to position us to just seamlessly move into that next stage of animal health traceability. We're continuing to work with some sale barn owners and some veterinarians on electronic data capture. And I was up in the Panhandle at our Amarillo office a few weeks ago, and it became obvious to me how important it is that our dairy veterinarian and our dairy practitioners especially have the ability to scan electronic RFID tags and import them into a machine that puts them into a spreadsheet that then puts them into an electronic health certificate, all at the push of a button. And literally our folks up there have a stack of health certificates this tall with hundreds of tags per transaction on there, and if they didn't have the ability to import that electronically, they just couldn't do their job. And so we're dependent on heavily, again, Dr. Cochran and our folks in our IT department to work with the industry and work with the federal government and ourselves to figure out a way to move to the even better system. And at some point, all veterinarians are going to need the ability to look at electronic tags, scan it, pull up a report, put it in their computer, and print out their health certificate all in one seamless motion. And of all the folks, the dairy industry is the one that's moving, hundreds if not thousands of cattle a day, and it's just impossible to do it with a pencil and a piece of paper anymore. So we're really struggling with that, and I'm proud and excited to have Dr. Cochran involved, because he's a cutting-edge guy on technology and a veterinarian, and so we have a real advantage having a vet involved with our IT department on that. And so our challenge moving forward is to continue to interface and improve the process, and probably at some point look at an electronic health certificate for the Animal Health Commission. Instead of buying a paper form, we're going to provide the template, or buy into a national template, and I think you'll see veterinarians go into electronic health certificates more and more as we move forward, especially for the larger consignments. On the cattle fever tick front, numbers are actually down a little bit. It's hard to say because there's some seasonality to that, but at least on track, it looks like that our numbers are still high, but they're going to be lower than last year. We've been running over 100 infestations a year down there for the last 3 or 4 years, and obviously the first concern was, well, a lot of the infestations were in the free zone. This last year we were able to get the numbers out of the free zone. We still had a lot of infested herds, but most of them were in the systematic zone or right across the road from the free zone. We've squeezed that down even farther, and as y'all know, most of our blanket quarantines or temporary quarantine zones have been closed. We just have one small one left down there at the Starr County, right just south of Zapata. Zapata still has a lot of deer issues. And so I'm just guardedly giving you good news that the numbers are looking a little bit better, but USDA, Dr. Varner, his folks are spending a lot of time focusing on deer issues as for the transmission of ticks. that reminds me that in a couple of weeks, I'm going to meet with some of the Farm Bureau folks and their wildlife committee, and the agency still has some, in my opinion, it's not for me to say, but we still have some deficiencies in our statutory authority to regulate adjacent owners of infested premises as far as for deer, the feeding of deer. If you have a low fence and we're trying to feed treated corn to kill the tick and the white-tailed deer, and there's a low fence, and the folks across the fence are feeding a protein block or their own corn, or they're not cooperating, it could inhibit our efforts to remove the ticks. And one of the organizations where the Farm Bureau folks have asked me to come visit with them about that. We talked to them about it last time. Right now, the agency can only regulate an infested premise as far as the deer, and I'm going to suggest to them they consider in the next session taking a look at giving the agency a little more authority so we can actually also regulate adjacent premises to infested premises, because on the deer side, the cattle side is not as hard to work with them, but on the deer side, if deer feeding is part of the solution to removing the ticks from the wild population, and you have a non-cooperative deer owner next door, it can cause us some problems, and it has caused us some problems. So we're gonna explore that with some of those folks, and obviously that's not up to me or even us to decide whether we have statutory enhancement to our authority, but I think there's a hole there that needs to be evaluated. We're still, USDA folks are still, the ivermectin treated tub experiment is underway, so to speak, as far as validating the ability to use ivermectin treated molasses blocks for cattle to self-medicate themselves with a product that kills ticks. There's a pasture near Laredo that's infested with microplus ticks, and we have a pasture near Del Rio with annulatus ticks. There's two different kinds of ticks. And FDA, we're working closely with FDA. They did ask us to extend the study from just a 60 or 90-day study to a 9-month time frame that would mirror the quarantine time. And so the study's going to take longer to get approval than we hoped, but we are optimistic that it's eventually still going to work. And this is going to be a huge cure and a huge solution for us in infested premises down there if we can put out a product where cattle can self-medicate themselves, and it will reduce the times the animals have to be dipped and scratched. You still have to do it some, but not as often, which will be good for the producer. So USDA, FDA folks are working closely with us on that. We still have not started a vaccine trial. We still do not have permission for the Cuban vaccine that the agency bought 3 years ago to be used in food animals. It's hung up somewhere within USDA internal processes as far as the evaluation of the chemicals in the product. Truthfully, I don't see the Cuban vaccine as a solution anyway, because it's only right now effective against the annulatus ticks. And almost every infested premise we're finding right now is the microplus tick down around Zapata. It's the tropical, it's a different, they're like cousins, but the vaccine works better, 90% probably effective on the annulatus. The northern tick, like the Del Rio area, and maybe only 30 or 40% effective against the microplus, which we find farther south. And so the Kerrville, USDA ARS Kerrville folks are working on some research right now to try and find a better vaccine. We had some pass-through money from Texas Department of Agriculture that we were fortunate to get, and again want to thank them for their help. And that was able to allow Kerrville folks to hire an extra person, and so hopefully long term we're going to find a better vaccine for the microplus tick. Short term we're going to pursue that Cuban vaccine, but it's going to have limited applications, in my opinion, just for the northern part of the infestations. Any questions on ticks? If not, I'll move on. Board report issues continue to be of concern to everyone. The violence, it's all subjective. Is it better? Is it safe? Is it good enough? Are you willing to go across the border? Are we willing to send our employees? It's probably not safe enough yet. I did have one piece of good news. Dr. Varner and I did go down and visited a facility in Nuevo Leon near Columbia, just north of Laredo, and the Nuevo Leon state officials, animal health or cattle organizations are building some export pens that are supposedly going to be finished probably about the 1st of April. They're in a safer location, so it's only about a mile across the bridge. And when Dr. Varner and I came back in his nice federal truck, the guy said, "Did you really take that truck into here?" And we said, "Well, we're just going right over there." And he said, "Yeah, but you still shouldn't have done that." So we're not really sure how safe it is, but it's obviously safer than some of the other places that we've had to go. I would say, from my perspective, though, the facilities on the Texas side are working well. As the state vet, there's some value to that, in my opinion, because we have access to it and we can see what's going on. There's always the risk that you're going to find something on the wrong side of the river. That actually has happened in New Mexico at the Santa Teresa ports 3 times in the last 2 months. They had a lockdown on Mexican imports at Santa Teresa because of a pox virus, kind of a normal thing that kind of mimics, foot and mouth or diseases that can cause lesions in the mouth. Dr. Fly, the state vet from New Mexico, and I have had some discussions with the Mexican officials, and I'm going to do it again next week at the binational meeting in Nashville. And we may have a meeting. My concern is the Mexican veterinarians should have caught this before they crossed the cattle. And all the cattle coming in the U.S. are supposed to be looked at by Mexican veterinarians before they're looked at by USDA veterinarians. And it was the first time it happened. They had about 4,000 head of cattle locked down for 2 or 3 days while they did a foreign animal disease investigation on both sides. And by the 3rd time, I don't think USDA even told anybody about it, and that's of concern to us as well. Half those cattle in Santa Teresa come to Texas, by the way, or probably more than half. So that's really our biggest port, to be quite honest. It's as big as any of the ports in Texas. So we're going to continue to explore that. But other than that kind of a thing where you got cattle on one, and basically what it was is half the cattle had crossed over into New Mexico, and the rest of the consignment, they found lesions that scared them, and they had to lock down both sides. And so that's going to happen. But the bottom line is the process worked. Our veterinarians, the USDA veterinarians, caught the situation and locked it down. But there was some concern for the cattle industry while we waited on the final answer to that. But other than that, I think our border port situation right now is pretty stable, and the inspections on the Texas side are working well from my perspective. On the cervid side, we do have, we are starting to enforce the elk movement requirement. Y'all graciously extended the elk industry a 1-year extension last year on the ability to move elk without a status, so to speak, which is similar to the white-tailed deer. Basically, they were supposed to sign up and submit brains when animals died, and the number of brains they submit is based upon how many elk they want to sell or move. And I think we probably have 10, maybe 10 total elk breeders in the state signed up. There's still a resistance, obviously, for them to do that. Our commitment is, and we've worked with Commissioner Winters in the industry, we're going to enforce this rule uniformly. There's 3 markets that sell a lot of elk, and they've all said the same thing: as long as you enforce it everywhere, we're okay with it. There's been 2 special sales since January 1st, one in Huntsville, and they had no elk there, and one in Harper, the Raz sale, and they had 1 consignment of elk, and the guy was enrolled, and so he was legal. But we're going to continue to watch this, and there's probably quite a bit of underground elk movement going on right now, which is in violation of commission rules. And we'll continue to work with the industry folks. And Commissioner Winters is a leader in that, and I think Dr. Hensley in a minute is going to talk to you guys about the cervid meeting y'all had last fall in November. And so I won't enhance that anymore. But we are committed to enforcement of that. The last thing on my report here is on the waivers. I had 5 waivers requested since the last meeting, and I approved all of them based upon minimal risk. The first was on a trick rule. We had 12 bulls that wanted to come to Texas from Oklahoma. All were virgins, which doesn't matter anymore in theory. They all had a trick test, but 5 of the 12 bulls' trick test was out of date by 20 days. And I had to talk to the Oklahoma State vet, and he actually sent an inspector out there to make sure they were isolated. They weren't females, and they were. They looked young enough to really be virgins. These are young bulls, and we decided to let them come on in, and they were retested upon arrival. Another trick request was to allow 35 13-month-old virgin bulls to come in, and this was a guy that crosses. They looked young enough to really be virgins. These are young bulls, and we decided to let them come on in, and they were retested upon arrival. Another trick request was to allow 35 13-month-old virgin bulls to come in, and this was a guy that crosses bulls every year. He's an established producer with no history of trick, and he just did check our rules, and he was ready to roll with them, and they were virgins, and I talked to his private veterinarian, and they tested upon arrival in Texas, and so we let him come on in. He promised not to do it again, so I'll let that happen. Had one fever tick waiver, which is on some soil from the systematic zone to move to a cement plant without treatment or inspection, and we allowed that based upon the input of the tick directors down there and the folks that said, you know, they're going to make concrete out of it. So, you know, if there was a tick, they're like entombed in concrete now, so it's okay, and I approved that. Feral swine, one waiver on feral swine. And this was a waiver actually to allow for research at the Kerr Wildlife Management Area. And they had some feral swine, but they didn't have enough. They wanted to bring some more in and then do some studies on them. But that would have made them in violation of our requirement for a double fence. But I think we better do some studies on feral swine if we ever want to figure out what to do with them. So I granted a waiver to allow them to bring some feral swine and release them into their wildlife management area. So they can do this study, and it's supposed to be over in the spring, and they have a good fence, but you know, they already had wild hogs there. We just let them bring in a little bit more, and so I made that call. TB one waiver, and it was on some Holstein bull calves, and technically Holstein dairy bull calves are supposed to be held under hold order and tested at 2 months of age. Steers are exempt from that, and they wanted to ban these bulls after they got to Texas. They kind of put off to the last minute moving them, and so they had identification. So basically what we did was we waived the test rule for them to come in, and then once they banded them, then the test rule didn't apply, but I technically had to give them a waiver, and they were in a larger consignment. There's more than 1,000 in the group. There's 4,000 or 5,000, but only 1,000 of them, they hadn't castrated them or banded them in time before they moved with them, and so we let them come on in. And once they were banded and we inspected that, then the test requirement was not required, and so it was kind of just, it was a weird little waiver. I had to do it to be legal, but the truth was after they got here, they were steers as soon as they showed up. So I've got something new on here, and I don't know if this, we're going to see if this is a good idea or not. If it raises y'all's hackles or concerns, I won't ever do it again. I actually thought I might tip y'all off, because I'm always thinking and talking to you guys about rule proposals and things that might need to happen in the future. And sometimes I know we have a rule show up, and I don't have the opportunity to call all 13 of you every time and talk to you. So these are just ideas. These are ideas that I'm going to be talking to the respective commissioners about. Some of you have already talked to them about them, but there's a difference in talking to you about it and actually putting a rule up for a proposal. And the chairman is always involved in that final decision. And obviously, if we're going to propose a rule, he makes that call. But these are just some examples of some things we're working on right now at the staff level and with some of the commissioners that may be on the next commission meeting for a rule proposal. And one is microchipping pyroplasmosis reactors. What we're thinking about doing, and we've lost some infected horses, they just go away. You go ask the guy where to go, and they go, I don't know where it went. Not my horse. You know, it seems weird, but that's the truth. One of the things we're actually talking about doing, especially now that we know the treatment is probably effective if you want to spend the money. You can probably now for about $750 treat a horse, and most of them are being treated. We didn't know that was even possible 2 or 3 years ago with the Imidaclar product. What we're thinking, kicking around is, and Commissioner Wheelis obviously be involved in this, and then the chairman as well, and some of the vets may ask your opinion, is considering a rule that would say, all right, you got a pyropositive horse, we retested, it's still positive, you got 7 days to either microchip it or start treatment on it. And that way, if we've got a horse that's just quarantined, and we've probably got 50 or 60 at least quarantined, infected horses around the state. Had a couple in El Paso area that's disappeared on us. They're not there. People aren't there. They're all gone. You know, we're thinking about putting a microchip in, and they go in the neck area, and you could scan, and it'd be a little easier to identify a horse if it shows up somewhere else. And this would probably, what this means, we start using our scan ability more than we are now. Identification of horses is difficult, but we've lost a number of pyropositives.
Can you find it with a satellite?
Well, that's actually, depending on what kind of microchip we put on it, that would actually be kind of interesting. I suspect they're all in Mexico. but there might be a few running on a Sunday afternoon somewhere in the pasture. So I'm just thinking about it. Calf ranch permit, I've talked to a couple of y'all about it. I haven't had a chance to talk to our new commissioner about this, but one of our biggest liabilities are the very small calf ranch folks that are bottle feeding, and I'm not talking about thousands, but I'm talking about bottle feeding maybe 500 Holstein calves a week old. They come and go. They're here today, they're gone tomorrow. And we had this problem in our last TB infected dairy, the Tapia Dairy in San Angelo. We lost a lot of calves because they were bottle feeding. We go there and the guy's not there anymore. They moved or they left. And so we're gonna work with the dairy folks, obviously, but I'm not worried about the big guys. It's the smaller ones, and obviously we have to figure out how small is too little to worry. You know, I don't want someone with 3 Jersey cows and 7 calves to have to get a permit, but maybe it's 150. I don't know what the number is, but what we're thinking is if we require you to have a permit to be a bottle feeding dairy calves, at least it gives us the opportunity to come talk to you, get some contact information, make sure they have identification, they have a tag in their ear. We can kind of say, where are you getting these from, where are you going, and it'll help us in the next TB infected dairy we get in Texas, which we will have another infected TB dairy in Texas. I just know we will. And so, you know, throwing that out for thoughts, and we'll talk about it. Prohibition of inbreds next to breeding animals, we've talked about it, and the cattle feeding industry has done a great job at trying to educate folks on this. Not a good idea to have inbreds next to a fence, next to maybe some backgrounded heifers. It still continues to happen occasionally. The last one we had was actually some bulls. Some bulls that were in there being fed in theory for slaughter, but there's no rules that said they had to go to slaughter, and they were right across the fence. And so talked to the guy, and he moved them. But I've had a few things, conversations on this, and something to consider at some point. Do we want to just pass a rule that says, you know what, you're not supposed to do that? We all know it's a bad idea. And again, obviously the chairman is our feedlot commissioner, but we'll be talking to you all about that. Pseudorabies quarantine release timeframes, the federal guidelines are 60 days, and Dr. Schwartz is actually involved, and we believe we could probably shorten this down to about 30-day release. Timeframes, the federal guidelines are 60 days, and Dr. Schwartz is actually involved, and we believe we could probably shorten this down to about 30-day release on some of these hog herds, and we're going to actually probably look at shortening that quarantine release down to a shorter time frame. And then elk hybrids, I put it on there. I'm not sure what we're going to need to do from our rules and regulations, but folks, in a possible attempt to dodge the requirement for elk surveillance, we know that they cross with red deer, and at the first sale the other day they had Sika, elk, red deer, 3-way crosses, and we're going to need to work with Gene and probably you, and we may need to enhance our rules a little bit in this regard. It's kind of fuzzy, unexact. So that's my first attempt to throw out some things that may come to the next meeting. I'm not meaning to scare anybody. Nothing's been done, and I'll talk to each of you more, but I thought we're always thinking about stuff and working on stuff, and I think it's good that we raise the awareness. I'll put that on there. And it's also for the folks in the room, and we'll be talking to our industry, obviously, as well about all these issues. So no decisions are made. The last thing, if you notice there, my out-of-office activities, there's a couple of things I want to just mention to you. I mentioned to you about working with Farm Bureau now. We're really excited about working with Texas A&M. We met, and Texas A&M is in the process of probably starting an emergency management institute or emergency management school of some sort, and we really are looking forward to working with them. They're going to be a really good partner with us in fire response and hurricane response and just helping with animal issues and disasters. So we're proud to be a part of that. I went to the Tri-National Accord Conference. Commissioner Staples asked me to go up there and discuss with ag commissioners from both the United States and Mexico border issues, and that was a very good meeting. I very much enjoyed working closely with Texas Department of Ag officials and the other folks in a little different setting. Animals were just one of a number of issues. Sugar, potatoes, there are a whole lot of issues on the table besides just animals, and it was very interesting. I enjoyed that, and I think it was worthwhile. And again, I mentioned to you, and back in December, Dr. Varner and I did go to the Nuevo Leon pens met with the Nuevo Leon cattle officials, and their import pens are on track for March, April, and we actually also talked to them not only about cattle, but maybe looking at a horse import facility. Right now, there's no legal way to import horses from Mexico and South Texas because the places where they crossed were across the river, and our temporary pens are just for cattle right now at Amistad and at Laredo and at Farr. And also meeting with the tick force, and we're going to enhance their ability to work with us on emergency response and their ability to catch animals. Next Hurricane Ike, those guys are going to probably respond and help us with the animals on the highway. And so Dr. Varner, I want to give him credit for being a visionary and bringing his tick force into the realm of normal animal health interaction with the agency besides just ticks. They have a lot of expertise and good facilities and good people, and also as a staging area, they have an office down in South Texas. If a catastrophic hurricane hits down there in the Brownsville area, the tick force office would be a good place for us to set up in the parking lot and use their facilities and a little bit off the beaten path. And so we're trying to work through some of those, and are going to have an exercise with those guys at that point. The last thing I'll say is, and Dr. Terry Hensley is going to mention it more than I will, but we are working with USDA also closely, continuing to look at some cattle out in West Texas, Mexican cattle on the Texas side that live in Texas, but they get to go home whenever they feel like it. Horses as well, and we're actually catching, we've caught 18 of those right now. We have about 50 more that we're looking for. And we're going to test and we're going to catch those. And it's long term, the agency really needs to look at working with producers on the Rio Grande River about a security agreement or a way to ensure that those animals that have been in Mexico don't end up in the United States. The tick zone area, we catch most of them, but out there you get north of Del Rio to El Paso, there's not but 2 guys that ride the entire rest of the river. We're working closely with TSCRA on brands. Obviously, these are Mexican animals and have Mexican brands, and so I want to thank TSCRA for our help. And we actually are concerned that now that we've caught a few of them, the rest of them may disappear. They're going to show up at sale barns in Texas. TSCRA folks are going to help work with us on that. And one of the bigger issues is New Mexico. There's 2 sales in New Mexico that have pens in Pecos and West Texas, and these cattle can end up in New Mexico. So we're also going to work in New Mexico. This is my opinion is we have not been paying attention to the risk of Mexican animals coming in the United States. And what woke us up was the brucellosis reactor last year, and we're going to continue to work on that with USDA and with the industry folks and with local officials and federal officials. And I think we have to address this long term as an agency. We can't continue to pretend it's not happening. Dr. Vickers.
These burros, this burro issue in Big Bend State Park, is that?
No, it's not
those
part of the
Mexican
deal.
origin?
Well, I don't know the. I'd probably just say I don't know. We're not. You know, there's state park and there's federal park, and they're both. I don't know anything about that.
I
It's probably
Big
just
Bend a lot, and I mean,
yeah.
you're out there, and I mean, you see horses running, all over the place out there.
But I know that
A couple of years ago, I ran into a Mexican rancher and his son rounding up about 20 horses. He was running them back across the river between Boquillas. I mean, so it is a big issue.
well, the river's not a barrier. That's the bottom line,
Yeah.
and we can either acknowledge that and try and work with the producers and the industries to come up with a safe way to keep them in business, but ensure that they're disease-free from the diseases Mexico has, or we can just pretend like it's not happening. And sure, I'm sure some of those burros come and go as well, no doubt about it. But the situation now, there's horses and cattle involved. I'll stop there and be glad to answer any questions, and I'll probably need to answer some questions as the rule proposals come up, and I'll be glad to do that at any time. So if not, that's my report.
Any questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the actions of the Executive Director for the period from September 21st, 2011 through January 23rd, 2012.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the actions of the Executive Director. Is there any discussion? None, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Ellis, and I'm sure you'll be back up to answer some questions further down the road. Item number 5, Dr. Schwartz is going to present animal health program activities. Dr. Schwartz, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Welcome, Commissioner Bell. And had the pleasure of working in El Paso on your father's dairy out there, and I don't think I ever spoke to the group while he was commissioner, but welcome aboard. So, and I welcome any questions from anyone as I'm doing my report. I wanted to start off with cattle issues, tuberculosis. I just want to report that the last fiscal year 2011, there were 13 slaughter lesion animals found that had been fed for some time in Texas. Two of those were cleared because they weren't actually Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Mycobacterium bovis. They were another kind of mycobacterium. So 2 of the 13 were cleared that way. 9 of the remaining 11 were traced to Mexico cattle. And the other two investigations are still pending. They're likely are Mexico cattle also. So what I'm trying to say is our TB issues is connected to our neighbors to the south as we've known for some time. I didn't get this in the report, but I think it's worth mentioning. We did receive some trace animals, some TB exposed animals from a herd in South Dakota. These were show animals. They were part of a pasture sale, and they were pastured for about 2 months with a cow that ended up having TB lesions. They called her, sent her to slaughter. So after this sale, they had to chase down all these animals. We got one heifer went to a club calf operation in the Panhandle, and a heifer and a steer came here to Central Texas, and these were high dollar animals. I mean, the steer and the heifer were in just somewhere around $18,000 is what we paid for that. So what do we do with these TB exposed animals? So we got the option of either testing them out like they're an infected herd, or the owner has the option of going out and indemnity. And the state, we don't have indemnity for that, but USDA has some indemnity, but it has limits on it. It's a $3,000 limit actually, or a fair market value. In this case, these animals were assessed as feeder animals or breeder animals, not as show animals, and so they basically got weighing price on these animals. And so the individual in the Panhandle has elected to test his animal out, test his heifer out over about 9 months. And we initiated that this week. The individual here in Central Texas is elected to, just for the sake of his reputation, I assume, is elected to sell those 2 animals for indemnity, basically. So we're actually going to take an opportunity to do some training on those animals at College Station, so teach some of our individuals to collect tissue. But he's taken a big loss, and it just kind of points to something, that the industry ends up bearing the cost of these disease programs, and our success, in preventing these diseases has a big impact on the pocketbook of the industry. Moving on to brucellosis testing, I just want to let you know that we continue to do investigations whenever a reactor titered animal is found. That would be at markets where they're still being tested or at slaughter. And we've had a number of cases where the animal came through a livestock market, wasn't tested, and went on to slaughter. So what we try to do is, if we can trace it back to a specific herd of origin or unit of origin, we try to test only that unit. But in some cases, that's not possible, where there were multiple animals in a consignment. There's no identification recorded at slaughter, so we have to kind of cast a broader net, if you will, and test some animals in the country. I did want to mention a project that we are initiating within the next week or so. We've done some groundwork on it since last fall. It's called the Enhanced Passive Surveillance Project, and what this entails is our livestock inspectors looking for syndromes, certain syndromes in cattle, looking for increase in the number of cases of diarrhea or respiratory signs or lameness or something like 9 different syndromes. And we're getting some federal cooperative agreement money to do this project. And it's just a different way of looking at disease surveillance. Instead of testing animals, you're looking at them, looking at the population of the animal rather than individual animal tests. So I wanted to make you aware of that. Changing to the swine, pseudorabies free status. We've had that for a number of years. Texas has been pseudorabies free, and it's now time to do that application again. So we'll be working with Dr. Varner's staff to gather the numbers necessary and to maintain that status and to continue our brucellosis free status. I just wanted to mention that a number of cases we do monitor what the research that's going on and what's in the popular press about influenza, because as you know, the press likes to hit the panic button about swine flu and bird flu and all that, and there are just some some articles we'd seen recently about a swine flu virus they're calling a new variant kind of circulating out there. So trying to keep tabs with that. Regarding poultry, I actually put that a flock was depopulated in December. It was actually in November. In early November, there was a flock in East Texas of broilers that was diagnosed with avian influenza, not the notifiable kind, not H5 or 7. And the industry, the Poultry Federation has some members of the Poultry Federation have participated in an industry-funded, not a slush fund, but they to compensate owners when there has to be a depopulation. So they used their own funds within the industry to pay for these. They took out all the broilers on this farm, and there were hundreds of thousands of them. I think around $500,000 worth of birds on that farm. But some of the members of that coalition, if you will, don't really agree that those animals should have been depopulated. So there's a meeting in a couple of weeks, and we've been invited to come and talk, or at least state our position at that meeting. And so Commissioner Simmons will be seeing you there. We've had a lot of activity regarding equine. I'll just give you the latest on equine piroplasmosis. We had reason to believe that there were some horses down in the Sarita area that were at high risk. We basically had a quarantine horse that was moved out of a stall and another horse put in it. It was one of those horses Dr. Ellis was talking about that got moved. Well, we found where it was moved to, but we tested the horse that they put back in there. Well, guess what? It was positive. So we did an investigation on it, found out it was a stud horse that had been used to breed quite a few mares around that area. So we did some high-risk testing and found 3 more positive horses there. So we're following up on that. And we're also enforcing the requirement, that the rule that the commission passed last summer, that whenever a horse is tested for equine piroplasmosis, the rule that the commission passed last summer, that whenever a horse is tested for equine piroplasmosis, that the veterinarian must use our test document. It's basically like the BS Form 1011. It's got a picture of the horse that describes it. So we've started enforcing that at TVMDL and at NBSL. So we've asked that they not release the results unless that chart accompanies the blood test, the blood sample to the lab. Moving on to equine herpes virus 1. So far we've dodged any major outbreaks in Texas. They've had small ones in North Carolina and California. Currently we had a horse with neurologic signs reported to us over the weekend. So we're monitoring that situation. Hopefully it will turn out to be something else. But our veterinarian was out, helped necropsy the horse after it was helped post the horse and collect the brain for testing. So we're following up on that. Equine viral otoritis, that hit our radar screen. It's reportable to us. We had a situation where a horse had come back home from 2 major shows and it apparently brought the virus with it, we think, and infected 9 of the horses of the 15 horses that were at that stable. The commission rules just pertain to notification. The owner of a positive stallion has to inform the mares before those horses are bred. So we didn't do anything further than issue movement restrictions until the disease had passed. Just wanted to mention that equine infectious anemia, there's a federal rule that should be published soon, out for our review. And from what we've been able to hear, it sounds like it's a lot of what we're already doing with the EIA now. It just makes it a nationally accepted program. And Dr. Ellis, I think, probably mentioned this, but we plan to form a Texas Equine Issues Committee and have a call this week to address some of these concerns.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. I didn't mention it. It's in your report, but I didn't mention. But we have a beef issues committee process where we can talk to the beef industry, and we've had so many horse diseases pop up. All of them a little different, a little weird. Our rules are not always real clear. USDA authority is not always on point, as well as funding issues. But the expectations, rightfully so, are the Animal Health Commission is going to help the equine community work their way through this. And so this Friday we're going to have the first ever Equine Issues Committee conference call, and we've developed a formal process where we talk to the horse industry. I've worked pretty closely with Dr. Green, the dean over at the vet school, to get some ideas on who to include, and she and I have had some discussions, private and personal, about how to enhance Texas' ability to interact with horses. We see this as a strategic plan moving forward. It's one of the things the agency probably, whether we like it or not, we need to do it, and so we're embracing this and moving forward with how do we engage the horse industry. And so we're excited about that. We're not excited about all these diseases Andy's talking about, but if they're going to be here, we need to have the right process in place to communicate with the stakeholders, and so we're moving forward with that. Thanks for letting me say that.
Thanks, Dr. Ellis. Moving on to the cervids, I just mentioned that there was a cervid health issues meeting in December, and I think Dr. Hensley may talk a little bit more about that. Also mentioned that the long-promised federal CWD rule may be published, may not. I'm not holding my breath. We've been promised for over 2 years, but on and off again, so I don't know. We'll see what happens. We are asking that. We feel like that's one of USDA's roles is to provide a national guideline, a benchmark for all of us to aim for, so, if you will. Okay, moving on then to the last section of my report about the state federal laboratory update. She recalled at the last meeting I told you that we did choose to close 2 of our 4 state federal labs that we had operating, and the 2 remaining labs are in Fort Worth and in Austin. I'm happy to announce that Dr. Holly Priemski has taken over the duties of the Director of Labs, and she's with us back here. Thanks, Dr. Priemski, for taking that on. It was Dale Preston was our Director of Labs before he retired in May. And Amy Ramage, our Fort Worth lab director, stepped up and did a wonderful job during a tough time. We had the whole lab consolidation, the high volume of samples, the change in test procedures. She dealt with a lot of issues, but we still have some issues going forward and some good things in the works. But I'm happy to have Dr. Priemski do that. It saves the agency money. We just added it to her things to do. She gets to try her management wings, and so we have great expectations there. I would say that the sample volume has remained high. We are on track to test about 2.4 million samples with a little over half the people we had last year. So as you can imagine, about all we're doing is testing samples there. But the market samples have decreased, slaughter samples have remained high. But as a very important project that Dr. Ellis has asked that we undertake is to seek NALN approval, and that acronym stands for National Animal Health Lab Network. And we want to be recognized under the NALN system so that we can continue doing the brucellosis testing and pseudorabies testing here and get federal funding for that. So I left an incomplete sentence there. We're currently conducting audits of 13 individual processes within the lab. I mean, this process accounts for every piece of paper, every instruction, every sample that comes in, how the results are done. I mean, it's just incredibly intense and detailed operation, but we're really close to gaining that approval, and we expect to get that done within the next couple of months. I'm also proud to announce that we've gotten recognition or approval as an EIA laboratory, so we've now begun testing our own samples for EIA. We don't intend to do this sort of sample EIA testing for the public, but we'll do our own program samples that we collect. We also continue to do TB testing for our own purposes and for other states, and we do that under cooperative agreement with USDA. And the last I'll mention is that we're in the process of implementing a new lab information management system. That's the database that we operate the lab with, and that's an exciting thing because it allows a web interface, and we're incorporating options for fee to handle the fees, assessing and collecting fees if that's approved by the commission today or at some point in the future. And I just looked at what kind of numbers we would expect, and in December we tested about 20,000 samples that would fall under the billable samples if the rule passes today or if you choose to alter it. So that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions? None, thank you. Item number 6, Dr. Hensley. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'll start off here with some of our personnel changes. We've had quite a few over the last couple of months. Dr. Brad Williams, who's been our regional director in Amarillo for a number of years, has chosen to pursue a career in the private sector. He was made an offer which was good for his career, and while we hate to lose him, we wish him the best in his endeavors that way. Dr. Finch, who is our regional director in Region 5, is originally from the Panhandle. He and his wife grew up there, and David asked to be transferred to that position in Amarillo. And Dr. Ellis and I visited about it, and David is going to do that. He's going to report to Amarillo probably sometime in the early part of February. So that then left a void in Region 5. Last week we interviewed 7 veterinarians for that regional director position there. We're going to re-interview the top 2 this week, and hopefully within the next week or so we'll be able to make an announcement of who the new regional director in Region 5 will be. So I'm hoping that once these are in place, we'll have a regional director set for a while. You never know, what's going to happen and what opportunities come up, but that's the way it's played out. We've had some supervising inspector changes too. Howard Helmers, who's here with his wife today, and Dr. Ellis will recognize him for his long service to Texas Animal Health Commission here later on. But with his retirement, we've promoted Bart Stockbridge, who was a field inspector down there in Region 5. And I think Bart, he's a young fella, and I think has a bright future with us. So I think he'll do a good job. The other change, James Dixon, who was supervising inspector in Region 6, retired a few months back, and David Martin was selected to take his place in Region 6. So we also had a administrative assistant change in Region 2. Tammy resigned again to take a job in the private sector. We've just hired a replacement for her, and I think yesterday was actually her first day on the job. So hopefully that one's set. As far as I know, that's it for the personnel changes in those positions. We finished our second round of RIFs, reduction in force, in November. We lost another 3.5 inspector positions during that reduction. And as far as I'm concerned, now in the field, we're down to what I consider our critical mass. If we get much lower, we've already reduced some of the services we provide, not stopped them, but reduced them. And if we go lower now, we've lost pretty much all our redundant capacity. So if we have an emergency disease outbreak, whether it's natural or whatever, we're going to be hard pressed to cover daily activities as well as get people, reassigned to work on the emergency. So I'm hoping that we're done, with reductions, and that we can maintain our staff in the field at what we've got. And then if we happen to get a better budget next time, we would like to add back our field veterinarians, at least a couple of them, because we lost all of those positions in that first round. So right now, we depend on and work closely with Dr. Varner and his group for veterinary support. We have our regional directors, but we have no true field vets anymore. So we're kind of at bare bones, and hopefully we won't, have to lose any more folks out there. I think that's probably it. We've got, just to mention to you, we're left with 55 inspector positions scattered around the state. Some regions have a few more than others just because of the number of livestock markets and different things that occur, but total is 55. And like I said, that's what I consider pretty much critical mass that we need. If we move down to that next section on field updates, I've just got a few items here that I thought were fairly important to let you know about. We did have our CERVID working group, CWD working group. We chose to change the name of it for the future to CERVID Health Working Group because I think there's more issues out there that are important to the cervid industry than just chronic wasting disease. I mean, it catches all the limelight and all the press, but there's other issues there that we need to be open to and discuss, and I think we did some of that at this working group. Commissioner Winters is chairing that group and did a good job of kind of helping us stay on track, because there's a lot of issues to deal with. We talked about the way we are going to, I guess, manage our chronic wasting disease status program. We made a few changes in it to be a little bit more friendly to that industry, but yet hopefully make our status program still mean something. We don't want to water it down. As Andy mentioned, we've been told we may see the national rule at the end of the summer or early fall, and I think this probably is our best chance to see it. If we don't see it this time, I don't know if we'll ever see it. If we do see it, it may mean that we have to come back and tweak some of our rules to make sure we meet the national program standards. But I think we've got a good program, and I really think we're going to be equal to, if not better than what comes out nationally. So we'll just have to wait and see, but we're not going to stop working on ours. We're going to continue on and do the best we can with the program we have here.
Dr. Hensley?
Yes.
I'd like to make a comment, and a very positive one. Thanks to Dr. Ellis, and thank you, Dr. Hensley, very much. You guys were instrumental in selecting the people that we make up this Cervid Health Working Group. It's a very diverse group. It's a very diverse industry, and each segment has an area of primary concern. They don't always overlap. We're very fortunate in the people that do participate are participating, representing their segment of the industry, but their primary concern is the overall health of this industry in its totality. The overall health of this industry in its totality. Evidence of that, we've got two members of the working group here today in the audience, not here to pick a particular bone, but because they have such great interest in the well-being of this industry. I think this working group will become a very effective tool for us to be able to interact with the industry, strengthen it, and strengthen our position as well. And hopefully this will serve as a good blueprint for working groups in the future. So thank you very much, Dr. Hensley, for helping us get this thing up and going.
Thank you very much for assisting us with it, and those comments are, I think, well received. I know Dr. Ellis and Andy both mentioned our ELK rules are now in effect January 1st, and it's too early yet to see how that's going to play out. I think there are some of them that still think, you know, they don't need to be under these rules, but they are, and we'll do the best we can to work with them, continue to try to get them educated that it's in their best interest to do this. The first two sales, as Dr. Ellis mentioned, we didn't have any problems there. We really had, there were some juvenile elk that showed up at Raz, and I guess he was already signed up with us, so no issues there. And then they had some red deer at Huntsville. So we'll continue to look at what that red deer issue is going to be. If they start telling us everything's a red deer, we know that's not true, and then we'll have to get a little bit more serious about it. But we'll continue to work with them and see how that pans out. The next one, item B there, I called it the Trans-Pecos Project because I don't have a better term for it. But Dr. Ellis mentioned our concern along the Rio Grande River. We know, especially in that Trans-Pecos, that Big Bend region between Big Bend and El Paso, we've got enough evidence from our compliance people, from USDA investigators, that cattle are being drifted across certain areas of that river further into Texas and then marketed as Texas U.S. cattle. Dr. Ellis had approached Dr. Clifford about other personnel, and Dr. Varner, their budgets are tight too. So the Center for Epidemiology and Animal Health is conducting basically a risk analysis study of that area of the state to try to quantitate what that risk really is, not only to Texas but to the U.S. And depending on how that thing plays out, the hope is that will give information and credence to actually USDA being able to budget and hire some additional manpower to patrol that part of the river to maybe help with this issue. They're going to make a site visit next month. The people that are conducting this study are going to visit with our folks, with USDA personnel from that area, with area ranchers, with Border Patrol, with veterinarians, with anybody in that area that they think can shed some light on what's really going on there. We've had several conference calls so far about it, so we'll see how the site visit goes. But I think, to me, it's a difficult study because they're trying to quantitate a lot of unknowns. So hopefully they'll be successful with it, and then Dr. Ellis and Dr. Varner can use that to maybe encourage additional personnel to be assigned to that part of the state. That item C there says cattle gather along the Rio Grande River. It's sort of tied into that same type thing. It's not part of the study. It came from all of that evidence we have of what's going on out there. So Dr. Fincher and I and some USDA people went out before Christmas, actually in November, and spent a week actually touring along the river out there. The spot where we know they're crossing cattle, there's an independent rancher there. He runs no livestock on his place. He's absentee. But the Mexicans are pushing cattle in there. So he said, I'll cooperate with y'all, give you permission to use my place. You get rid of these cattle. So we took him up on that. There's an old set of corrals on his place about a quarter mile from the river itself. When Dr. Fincher and I were there were probably about 15 cattle and maybe 10 or 12 horses along a 5-mile stretch of that river. And we drove right along the Border Patrol road, and the river in that area wasn't much wider than this desk, and it was about 6 inches deep. There's cattle trails going back and forth just like on your ranch. You wouldn't even know that's an international border at that spot. I'm convinced we've got two populations of animals there. One I'd call river cattle and horses. They live there. That's their home. They cross that river just like they would on any ranch. They don't go anywhere. The other population are these animals that were intentionally being drifted across and moved further into Texas and then sold as Texas or U.S. cattle. Those are the ones, to me, we really are worried about. So Dr. Varner was good enough to come up with some money. Dr. Fincher kind of led the implementation of this for us, working with USDA. The USDA person there started baiting these cattle with range cubes. We were able to capture 18 of them in those old set of corrals here before Christmas. There's another 50 or 60 that have showed up there. They're still too wild. They're still feeding them. They won't come into the pens yet. We're also exploring, Dr. Fincher's getting bids from some livestock contractors that use helicopters and so forth. And we may, if Dr. Varner can keep some funds to it, use that and try to capture that whole group if we can. Now, in the meantime, they could drift them further up. There's a dry wash there that goes up northeast of Interstate 10 on the Texas Land Office land, and there's an old set of pens there that we have pretty good information. They're using those pens to load these cattle. So if they drift them up there before we can get all this done, then they'll be lost. We're working with TSCRA and their brand people to be more vigilant at our livestock markets out there. We now know some of these Mexican brands that we got off of these 18 cattle. We'll be looking for those brands at livestock markets. If we find them, we'll put a hold order on them, and we'll try to visit with the person that hauled them in and see what their story is. Dr. Ellis is going to visit Dr. Fly from New Mexico and see if we can get them looking at their livestock markets for these same brands. So it's a work in progress, and we've been successful to catch those 18. They tested negative for TB and brucellosis, but I think it shows us We've been successful to catch those 18. They tested negative for TB and brucellosis, but I think it shows us there is an issue there and a problem there. That part of the river and that part of the state is, you know, it's wide open. It's kind of no man's land, so I think that's probably why they chose the river shallow and not very wide, so it's easy to get stuff across there and into our state. So we're continuing to work on it, and we'll see how it plays out. It's kind of a dangerous project in a way because you don't know who's over there watching you from the Mexican side of the river, so we'll see how that goes. The next topic, emergency management. We all know we had a lot of wildfires this past summer and fall, and we got some good comments from ranchers and animal owners of the assistance we provided during those wildfires. We've now had our after-action meetings with our people, with some of our agencies that we cooperate with, like Texas A&M and their emergency group from the large animal clinic there, and we found some shortcomings and we found some positives. So we've had those discussions, and Amanda has, you know, gotten those reports done. So I think we all benefited from it, and we'll be better for it the next time we have to go to an emergency. So we'll continue to, as Dee said, work closely with A&M and their emergency group and partner with them. We'll do another exercise, I guess, this summer with Task Force 1, with the veterinary college, and with us, which is a good learning experience for all of us and helps us be able to work, you know, closer together. TVMA, the Texas Veterinary Medical Association, will be having their winter meeting here, I think it's next month, and TAHC is going to put on a 4-hour workshop. Amanda and Dr. Primsky will be doing a lot of that. I think it's good, I guess, vision for us to be doing these things, and it provides the veterinary community, I think, with some expertise that they can bring there. It's going to be basically geared to helping practitioners, veterinarians in private practice, better respond to disasters in their community and to develop plans for their own clinic, how it can function during these disaster times. So we're hoping that it'll be you know, well attended, and that the veterinarians will really gain something from this. There will also be a discussion panel, I think, at the end of it, which will be made up of some private veterinarians that have actually been involved in these disasters, and they can give their, I guess, view of how things work, good or not so good, and we can go from there. So that'll be a good thing for us. We're also going to participate in 3 multi-state exercises coming up this late spring and early summer. One of them is a FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency exercise that'll be looking at various food species, cattle, I think swine, and poultry. And it'll be where a toxic agent has been slipped into the feed source that supplies all those different species, and now it's causing illness and death in humans. So it's designed to try to help different agencies in different states coordinate and cooperate when you've got a wide spread situation like this. So we're participating in that one. The next one, USDA APHIS is having a foot and mouth disease exercise. I think in June. Again, it's to help agencies work better together, streamline their resources, and so when we have a multi-state outbreak, we're better attuned to work with each other and talk to each other. The next one is a multi-state stop movement exercise. That one, we're going to be there, but we'll be functioning primarily in observer capacity. We will be able to answer Texas-specific questions if they have them, and that'll be, I think, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Kansas, and maybe another state in there. We'll be there, but we'll be in the that item D, Amanda has recently taken on a co-chairperson position with the State Animal and Agriculture Disaster Response Alliance, which is SADRA for short. We're proud of Amanda for doing that. I think it's great that the Animal Health Commission now has a representative actually on that group, and she can provide a lot of insight to them and back to us on what happens there. She and I will be attending their meeting next week, actually. Amanda's going to have a couple of talks, the pre-disaster communication protocols that she's worked on. One of them is resource sharing between states. The other one is local planning resources for addressing animal-related issues during disasters. So I look forward to that. It'll be the first time I've attended it, and again, we're excited that Amanda's going to be one of the co-chairmen of that group. The other thing that she wanted me to mention, we're also working on an exercise with USDA and their tick force. An exercise which includes them and how we can work together during a disaster, whether it's a natural disaster or whatever, to better utilize them in that type of a disaster, especially if it's a hurricane or a flood down in that Rio Grande lower valley there. So we'll be doing that this spring. That's it for me. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
If none, thank you, Dr.
Okay,
Henson.
thank you.
Dr. Cochran will address items 7 and 8, administrative budget status report, and then agency contracts and purchases. Dr. Cochran.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and some of the commissioners.
I didn't have anything to do with that. I'm sorry.
I landed about right time for that coffee or water or whatever. So I'll just start off with in section 7. You have a few notes here up front, followed by 2 sections of the numbers. And, at the bottom of the pages, just for your reference, A is basically 2012, the year we're in now, and B is 2013, when you're looking at those statements and funding schedule. Slight change to this report is at the end that we have a fee revenue status. Kind of what we had projected for this year, what we've received, and then some charts, which I think are in color on the last page, that show the percentage, or kind of a pie chart showing what we keep, what we've collected, what goes back into the treasuries, health certificate revenue. So I'll get to that. I'll start off, though, with just a few mentions on budget. Dr. Ellis has already said a few things, but we do have unexpended balance authority. So as Commission does, it's one of our, I think it's a rider. So that UB authority allows us to carry forward any money that we save or conserve this year into the next fiscal year within the biennium. I think that's important because we're forecasting, as you'll see in the funding schedule B, a shortfall in 2013 due in part to our projected federal funding decreases to the tune of about 35%. And those are 2 consecutive decreases, one this April and then the next. It's just what we're thinking, and Dr. Varner's working with his regional managers in Colorado to try to ascertain what our federal funding is going to be for this year coming in April. We are submitting work plans now. Slight change, just for your information on the work plans, is they're going to species. They're lumping more of our cooperatives into just species groups. We've got bovine and equine, cervid. I think the Cape Brine, Cape Brine, and those are some of those being lumped together. Swine is another one, of course. So things are, changing from what they have been for the past 10 years in that light. We don't know, again, what the funding levels are going to be, and one bright spot is we did recently receive a federal pass-through grant from West Texas A&M to work on a 2-year foreign animal disease project. So we're really trying to reach out for any extra funding because $132,000, even over 2 years, means a lot to us right now. We are extremely lean, and so our numbers can change with any small instance, any extra cost in the field or something we have to do. We have to adjust that. We're really running tight. So regarding fees, Dr. Ellis mentioned our back and forth with the controller's office, or comptroller's office right now. Our monies and the legalese of our Rider 10 is being looked at by the Revenue Estimating Division. Those are the people who actually keep the books, so to speak, in the controller's office. And Zelma Smith, our former LBB manager, is working with them. She was involved. We've since gone to one of her staff, Erin Hendrickson, who will be our LBB analyst going forward. He works, for Zelma. She's still in LBB. So that's Rider 10, and that was the lump of 4.9 million and all kinds of things. It's kind of an ideal figure. It's what we would ideally have, and we have we don't think we're going to see that, of course. So we're working on that to just be able to use or spend what we have taken in. The money is sitting in accounts. We do see it, and the comptroller sees it too, but it's in an account that's unappropriated. It's not appropriated to the agency. So just real quickly, the IT team has been doing really good work for us. There's a lot of internal business processes that keep this place running, and we're going through a lot of change. And they have quickly introduced a new work measures system and a time tracking system. It's internally developed, and I think it's going to really streamline things. It gets rid of redundant data entry with our field personnel. And so I'm really thankful to them on the development side and on the help desk side for pulling that out so quickly. It can go live as early as February. This is something that everybody in this agency will use every day to track their work. We have been using something that's a little more cumbersome, but we have to do for performance measure reporting to the state. We have a lot of reporting there. You'll see that in our strategic plan, and we've got federal billing reports that run off of this stuff, and we attribute travel costs throughout cooperatives that way. So that's something they've really been working on. They're also talking about taking us to a different kind of a cloud-based email system with Microsoft, which promises probably reduce our static cost with better functionality. Staff Services Department, we've gone ahead and put in this new inventory and asset management system. It's almost turned on and in use, and it just is going to allow more just-in-time stocking or drop shipping. That's our hope. So it'll allow us to more easily track things. We have to go through an annual inventory of items out in the field, so they have tags on them, and this is going to most likely allow us to cut the number of days that our staff here has to be out in the field looking at all the field personnel, equipment, other items that are required to be recorded. Financial services team, the budget's always first and foremost these days since we're walking that fine line, and they've been doing a good job there, and they're also going through a lot of change, implementing this new SAGE accounting system with the Ziegner Uniform State Accounting System add-on. So we're tying that into the LabLink system, the LIMS that Dr. Schwartz talked about over at the lab, to make them communicate as to any overdue accounts when it comes to brucellosis testing and that sort of thing. So just one thing after another. And then lastly, as far as my sections, animal disease traceability, and Dr. Ellis did speak to this a little bit, we've made this kind of a generic 454 form that market veterinarians can use, with a computer to do their keep quick data entry as they see necessary at the chute side, at a market most likely, and then that
Thank you. Now, Dr. Cochran's going to go over
necessary at the chute side, at a market most likely, and then that that's going to allow them to more quickly make health papers after the fact. That's one of the main benefits. It also allows for easy uploading into our generic database of those records. So it's kind of it's a win-win on both sides. And it's been tried recently around Lampasas and then up in North Texas as well. in our Region 3. We're also working on integration of basic disease traceability into the new Core 1 system. Dr. Schwartz or Ellis spoke to that a little bit. Basically, it's an animal records management software. USDA invested with that group from Ireland. They're pretty good throughout the EU and even Turkey. They've met different reporting requirements in those countries, often much more fine as far as disease traceability and NACE. I mean, it's like nothing we've seen in the United States. But they have this nice software package. It's web-based. We have a no-cost instance of it that will run at a data center in Kansas City to start with. That's where the GDB, generic database, all those 20 million test records are getting ported to. And the disease traceability side, though, we're kind of working in parallel. It's not necessarily the GDB data entry that will concern ADT directly. It's more tag allocation and lid allocation. So if somebody calls, they wouldn't necessarily validate your ranch is here on the map. It would most likely for Texas be my address and my name are this. Okay, we're going to send you some tags in this serial. And those are allocated to you. Not dissimilar from what currently happens if one of you is wanting 840 tags or some other officially tracked ID. Yeah. But right now that requires pretty much a validated Prim ID. And this would be a change from that to something a little less specific. So that's Core 1, and we're going to have some tools. Hopefully, we're working with a company out of Ireland to make sure those tools come online through USDA as well. In the statements, real quickly, if you go to funding schedule A, page 2, these are all printed front and back. Basically, at the bottom, in the 2 gray bars, again, A, funding schedule, page 2. Those 2 bottom gray bars are the summary of where we could be at the end of this year, depending on whether we see all the fees we've projected or not. I don't think we're going to be as high as $528,000 to carry over. I don't think so. We'll probably be closer to the 286, depending on what happens with the comptroller's office and just our revenue. Certainly, then we go to 2013. There's on B, funding schedule 2, it's on the back of the last of these pages before the fees. You'll see possible shortfalls ranging from $483,000 to $967,000. And that's for, again, 2013. We have a lot of yet unknowns on the books. Cooperatives being one of them, and that's 2 years worth of cooperatives that contribute to these numbers out to 2013, but it's all we have to work with right now, and we have to play it a little bit safe in light of these numbers, and certainly conserve, which is what we're doing the best we can right now.
You got any bake sales scheduled?
Well, Dr. Ellis wanted to do an agency cookbook.
Works for
not really a revenue generator, but might be.
Washing cars.
Yeah. We're going to have a comfort food section, so that when we look at this, we can go home and eat that. So the fees you see there, projected or possible annual revenue. I don't call it projected; it's just possible. The fees collected. It's on the horizontal. It's a landscape page, and it's got the blue lettering there. And we've got fees collected for a year. It could be as high as $860,000. The possible agency portion could be as high as $485,000. That's at this point an ideal situation, depending on how the lab testing fee comes along, herd certification fee comes along, chronic wasting disease is in place, file registration is known, and then that agency portion of the health certificate, since we went to $7, is possibly $150,000. And that revenue that could be ours is still tied up in that appropriate appropriations conundrum.
Your biggest dollar amount projected right now in 2013 is your federal funding of, about 1.6 million drop off compared to 2012.
Yes, that's true. Which page are you looking at?
Well, it looks like for 2012, you're, which column is 2.7 million of federal funds, and then 2013, right now, you're looking at 1 million and about 1.1 million.
Right. Since the cooperative year, I've said it many times up here, spans those years. We saved a lot of cooperative dollars for this state fiscal year that we're in now. We carried them over from August to September, knowing that we were heading on a down slope. So that's why that figure's rather large for this fiscal year.
One of the things that's going to be confusing, I think it's a good change in the long run, but this year it's confusing, is instead of having a TB cooperative and a brucellosis cooperative, they're going to put them together and it's just in the cattle cooperative. They'll have the opportunity to reduce that if they want to at the same time, and we don't know how that's going to work out. They're throwing horses, sheep and goat, cervids, I guess, all in the same cooperative. Horses have never had any money, so if they get money now, they're going to steal it from the sheep or the cervid industry. So we don't know, not only is there a reduction, there's a change in the way they're managing the accounts for us. So we really have no clue what they're going to do, but we're planning for the worst case scenario.
Well, we hope it's the worst case. But yes, you're right. That federal funding is a major drop in our budget. I mean, we've gone from being a third funded federally to great reduction, maybe down as low as $800,000 overall. So, last page are the nice little colored pie charts. These books, they're colored, and the big piece of pie on the left, the blue, is Rider 10, the pie in the sky. No pun intended. 4.9 million from the Rider 10. And then the slices in red and yellow, the 14 and 4%, are total possible projection of revenue collection for this year. The 4% being what's been collected to date. And the extended chart off to the right is the portion, that 3% that's going to the Treasury, and the 1% that could come to us when we solve the issue of appropriation with the comptroller and LBB. Do you have any questions on this section?
If there are no questions, we have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the administrative budget status report as discussed today.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the administration budget status report as discussed today. Is there any discussion? If none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now, Dr. Cochran is going to go over the contracts and purchases.
I make an effort, I think, now to just allow you to say anything or ask any questions about things that may concern you here.
Correct. I'm sorry.
There's a lot of, there's quite a few. There's some annual renewals. Some of these are placeholders for funds to be spent on the likes of shipping, primary and secondary shipping vendors, Lone Star, Federal Express. There's some software license renewals. Photocopier leases, those are leases that can be broken. We did insure that, so we don't lay out a bunch of funds and not be able to recover them where they would be curtailed. So if you have questions.
If there's any specific questions on any one item, I will make a comment that Dr. Ellis and I and Dr. Cochran worked a month or so ago, a couple months ago, addressing a lease program in lieu of purchasing new vehicles, and I approved that to where they could get started any way we can save money and keep our field people with as good vehicles as we can provide. I approve that, but this is just simply the commission approving what I had already approved, and I hope I I legally approved it there, Gene, did I?
That's
good.
And this is a test pilot. We're doing 6 trucks. It's the very last time. And if it works out well, we're going to come back and do it again.
So I thought it was a good move, and this is just going to make it official.
Yeah, the leases are part of a big federal, we get a federal rate, they've got federal government gets.
Okay.
And it keeps us from incurring $1,000 maintenance costs on trucks. We've tried to keep going past $200,000, which has become untenable.
The one question that I had was on these portable corrals. We buy 2 more sets. How many does that bring us up to now?
I think agency-wide, that would put us at 5 to 6, and these are being purchased with pass-through
This is
funds
grant
from
money. Actually,
EDAs.
Texas Department of Ag gave us this money, so we wouldn't have bought them without that. So they're free, basically. But they're very important. They're good quality panels.
Field people had weighed in on this selection of these. Tick Force already uses some of this model, so that was.
Any other questions? If not, a motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the contracts and purchases requests for the period from September 20th, 2011 through January 23rd, 2012.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the contracts and purchases request for that period from September 20, 2011 through January 23, 2012. Any further discussion? None, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Cochran, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to item 9, instead of Gene presenting item 9, Richard Wagner is going to give us an update on the agreed order.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. Good morning. I'm here to present item 9, which is an agreed order against Stephen Smil for your consideration and proposal and approval.
Hey, Richard, he's our lead investigator. If y'all don't know Richard, he's our
Thank
chief
you.
investigator for compliance, so.
And I asked to do this, I asked Gene, and he got the chairman's approval because this was my case, and I've been chasing this guy for a long time. So I want to bring it to, I know this is on record, but I want to bring it to conclusion.
Okay.
Mr. Smil, Stephen Smil, is a trader, cattle trader, dealer, and the agreed order, which you have in your notebook, you can read, is regarding 10 dairy ID violations and 2 violations of the trick rule. And what Mr. Smil did, other than not tag dairy animals, the trick violations, he started out, he'd buy a bull, or he bought a bull at East Texas Livestock in Crockett on Tuesday. He charged it to one of his slaughter deals. When the sale was over with, he went in the office, he took it off the slaughter deal, and put it on his personal account. So the bull, there was no trick test when it was sold, because it was sold for slaughter. And he didn't, it was on his slaughter account, so he didn't, it wasn't permitted out of the market, but he changed it after the fact. That was on Tuesday. Saturday, he resold it at Wells Point, Van Zandt Livestock. Again, he sold it in his name, put it on a slaughter account, didn't bring what he thought it would, went back after the sale, put it on his personal account. Monday, he took it to Sulphur Springs and sold it again and and put it on his slaughter account and stayed there. He did that twice. And how we caught him was reviewing the market 454s and seeing the ear tags. It was a new ear tag, a retag. That triggered a red flag. We went and looked at the records, traced it back. I think he made $58 profit out of the deal. So,
Is that above the freight?
Yeah. No, that's not. That's just what was on the checks. We fined him $2,500 for the whole thing, and he has paid it.
I like your numbers.
You had to sell 50 more bulls.
Got on High Horse last time. Thank you,
Yeah,
Gene. I like
better
your
than
numbers.
$50 or $500.
Yeah.
So that's basically it. Any questions?
Good job. Yeah. Very good work. We appreciate all the work you do behind the scenes. Thank you. We have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the agreed order in the matter of Stephen Schmiel resolving violations of commission rules.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the agreed order in the matter of Stephen Schmiel resolving violations of commission rules. Is there any discussion? None, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Now we're on to Gene, and Gene is going to discuss item 10, adoptions of regulations, Chapter A, 33 fees, lab fees. Gene?
Yeah, so I'm going to bring up the lab fees first. As you're well aware, we had a rule proposal last time that involved putting a schedule for lab fees for our new lab system in place. As such, I bring back to you what was proposed. I will say we got a lot of comments, particularly on the other chapters. There were some issues fee related, but frankly, there was nothing ever was proposed. I will say we got a lot of comments, particularly on the other chapters. There were some issues fee related, but frankly, there was nothing ever specific to this particular chapter. I mean, there's clearly people have issues and concerns about us having to charge fees and what people consider to be a very difficult and trying time for animal agriculture. But as everyone knows, as we're trying to support the agency and stuff, and as we're not only requiring testing, but rather providing a service, there was a fee schedule done. Basically the only letter that was submitted that I put in this that was germane and specific, Texas Farm Bureau, just noted the fact that they recognize we're in a tough situation and want to help as they can, but they couldn't support fees. And so, as such, though, I do bring you back that proposal as is. I will note this as in terms of implementation. After you do this, we still have probably a couple months to actually get the system worked out to do the billing and there's quite a bit that goes in with that. So I think in discussions and stuff, we probably would look to maybe want to start collecting those fees.
And these are the maximum amounts.
Yeah, these are the maximum.
Charge less.
Any questions? None, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt the amendments of Chapter 33 fees, lab fees, located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
Second it.
Been moved and seconded we adopt Chapter 33 fees. Is there any further discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item B, Gene, if you want to give a brief explanation where we are with that. I have a couple of people that want to give comment. So before we move on this, I'd like to ask their comments, but if you'd like to give us a little.
Yeah, I appreciate it. The second fee proposal, as you should recall, is regarding our herd certification programs. These are voluntary disease certification programs for which we have 10 different varieties for cattle, swine, and sheep and goats. And so, as such, we put forth a proposal to charge $100 for each certification program. You will note in this we did get a number of comments, some good comments. The one comment, or particular strand of comment that was in several, and so I want to make you particularly aware of it, was that we should use a gradated scale, not a standard $100 across the board, because as some noted that they may only have a very small herd, and so it didn't make sense economically to spend the same amount for a large herd. As such, and when you look in the comments, I didn't make the change yet because I want to get y'all's approval, but we would agree that if that is something that's appropriate, it is going to be reduced revenue streams, but that we would reduce it to a range of price, a fee that would go, if you've got less than 25 head, adults, we charge you $25. If you got 25 to 100, it'd be $50. And if it was more than 100, it would have more than 100 head of adults, then it would be $100. And then we would also provide for certain recertifications and stuff that those would be, because they're minimal effort to do those, $25 a certificate for the swine brucellosis and the swine tuberculosis. So.
I might just throw in a comment here, and I think this is a good example of looking at the comments and maybe taking some second thoughts about what's a good idea. And truthfully, we're not going to balance our budget on this anyway. We do need the fees, but I made the call to consider the graded system. We don't want to discourage people from certification and testing, and the revenue streams a pittance anyway. So we pulled this out of thin air. Is it perfect? Probably not, but it does concede that probably a guy with 8 cows and a bull should not pay the same as King Ranch. I mean, the truth is the same people are going to do it, and the big ones are maybe just as easy to do as the little ones, but we listened to the comments. We're recommending that probably we should have a graded fee based on the number of animals involved. And because the bottom line, I don't want to discourage, I don't want people dropping out of the program. It's for animal health reasons, and yeah, we will lose some revenue on it, to be honest.
When would you plan on maybe being more specific with what that may be?
Well,
that's what in the rule, if you look at the response to comments, the range, and I would just replace the $100.
I mean, we could modify it, but, you know, the average cow herd in Texas is what, 37 or 40 or whatever.
Okay.
So we got less than 25, they pay something, 25 to 100, they pay a little more, and the hundreds for the big herds. It would apply to swine. We have a lot of people, you know, show hog folks that if they're gonna have one certification, they also have the second, they have pseudorabies and brucellosis, and it's the same test, the same vet, the same process, and they probably shouldn't pay $200 fee. So it's not just cattle, this is for all species, and there's some goat folks and TB-free herds, and they're small herds, and like I said, I'm more interested in not losing certification and losing our animal health infrastructure than making money. This is not a money maker really for us, other than a little bit. It's going to help a
Big
little bit.
certified herds, you're gonna be making money in the future on the testing.
That's true.
You know, I mean, you got a guy with 600 certified, that you're certifying every year, you know, $100 doesn't compare to the $1.50 a head you're gonna be making on the testing every year on those animals, so.
Good point. There's no right or wrong answer. We just kind of, we listened to comments and changed it a little bit, and that's about how.
Yeah, this was a concern, and I will note, if you look at the bottom of the third page of this particular rule and stuff, that's where I did identify the spread. I didn't go ahead and make the modification.
Yeah, that's right about this
This is one of those with fees and stuff, sometimes we go ahead and do it.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that.
No, it's all right, but it's there, so you can look at it.
Okay, we have 2 public comments here. Part of these public comments have to do with elk movement too, so please feel free to mention that. I know we discussed that earlier, but also some fees for inspection of service facilities. So I'll start with Charlie Seal. Charlie Seal has always been a great partner and has always been involved in committees and helping us deal with the exotic wildlife issues. Charlie, you're representing the Exotic Wildlife Association.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and also members of the commission. As the commissioner said, I am from the Exotic Wildlife Association, their executive director. We have sat on this surveyed working group now for the last few years. If some of y'all that remember, we came before y'all before asking for some tolerance on the elk rules to allow our producers time to be able to test and give the necessary information back to this commission that was necessary. Well, we failed miserably, as you know. That's what brought us to where we're at right now. And let me just say, in working across this nation with various ag groups and animal health commissions, ag departments, Texas is very, very unique. It's an industry-friendly health commissions, ag departments. Texas is very, very unique. It's an industry-friendly commission, and we applaud that from the producer side because there are a lot of them out there that do not treat the producers the way they should. They exist, the producer exists for them, not the other way around. And this is not the case here. Having said that, the plan that we have put together, the rules, regulations now governing the intrastate movement of elk, it's not a perfect situation, but in light of what we had to work with and what we are working with, Dr. Ellis was kind enough, once this thing was approved, to give producers an extra year. This commission has worked, and your executive director and his staff has worked tirelessly with industry, giving them every opportunity. That brings us to where we're at today. I think it's a very fair, in light of everything else that's going on in the country. You need to understand that the CWD issue is a media-driven. I fear a lot worse things, and thousands, literally thousands of deer have died this past year from EHD and other issues than CWD will ever kill in its, I guess, in the history of CWD. But we're faced with it. And so we're going to have to deal with it. I think this rule is very fair to the producer. It lines out exactly what he should do and gives them every benefit to be able to qualify for movement within the state. And that's something that once we get the federal rule, if we ever get the federal rule, I think as Dr. Hensley said, it's going to be far and above. Our rule here is going to be way above what the federal rule is going to say. I'll let Warren clear up some other things on what he wanted to talk about that. I want to mention one thing, Mr. Chairman, about the fees for inspection. We have enjoyed years of no fees. I could call my animal health inspector. He came to my deer pens, did the inspection, and he and I had a very good rapport. And I was used to that, not having to pay for that service. Times again have changed. The budget of this state and the budget of this nation is in shambles, and we have to change with that. I've been fortunate enough in the deer industry to make money at that, and so I have no problem paying the fee that has been outlined. I think it's fair in light of all the circumstances that this agency faces, the budget crunches that it has, and the employee layoffs that we've had are not filling job requirements. But again, I want to support that, and I'm speaking as a producer myself, that I will support that fee structure, and I think our association supports that as well. Having said all that, thank you for your time, and I'm going to let Warren give his talk.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you very much for your comments. Warren Blunzen is a wildlife biologist, also, as well as Charlie, very involved in any working groups or any committees that we ask him to be part of, and he attends almost every one of these meetings. Warren, thanks for coming.
Thank y'all. I appreciate it. Mr. Chairman and Commission, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I would like to make one comment before we start. Dr. Ellis was out of the room. Please don't consider a cookbook by Cooking with D. You don't know about that, but that's just a message to you before I get started. I wanted to comment a little bit about elk movements and the current situation with that. I had a lot to do with sitting in on that committee that helped write those elk rules, and it's kind of like the little child that grows up and you get about 16, you think you know it all, and coming up here this morning, every time I get a little older, I realize I don't know near as much as I do, but we did what we had to do in a difficult situation, and I think my message to you this morning is going to sound a little bit strange. I'm not real pleased with the elk regulations, but with that said, we got a couple of football players hurt on the star team. You do it the best you can. And we had to look after the resource of the state and disease protocol and models, and that's where this actually ended up. And what I want to challenge you all with, and I feel this is coming, countless hours were put into that those elk regulations, countless hours. And for fear of leaving someone out, I won't say thank you to obvious people that are in this room. But I want to challenge you with one thing. I'll be back up here soon, and it'll probably be to ask you to reconsider tweaking those regulations as time goes on. We started those discussions some 3 years ago. Times have already changed. CWD is being looked at differently. But I want to assure you, I think we all did what we needed to do at the time we did it to protect our interest in commerce here in Texas. But I will challenge you to expect probably to hear from us again when times change and we can maybe relook at how this thing's structured and this model's set up. I want to also not tell anyone that anyone likes fees. But I think in my rounds, I'm a wildlife biologist, not only in Texas, but all over the nation. I have a lot of people's lives I touch in Texas. And I want to let you know that I think the majority of the people expected fees eventually for things they were getting free. And that I think right now they're okay with it. A couple of things are happening that we didn't know would happen. You may lose some people that were involved in those inspections from your people because they have a certain cohesion with their veterinarian for other reasons. So I don't expect it to swell.
So with that, Dr. Ellis, I will tell you and Commission that I think you're going to be okay with the fees. I personally think they're fair, and I looked at them closely. So with those statements, I think Charlie kind of touched on some issues for you, and I wanted to make sure that I got here today to share my feelings with you about these elk regulations and challenge you to keep it in the back of the file that it probably will come back up. While I'm here, I'd be glad to answer any questions or any comments. Thank you very much for chairing that survey working group, and I know we changed the name of it, and I'm very proud of that group and think we accomplished a lot, so thank you for your leadership and the opportunity. Any questions? Yes.
Warren, I've got a question for you, and I'm kind of coming out of, I mean, we have talked about this before, obviously, but I've talked to some people clients that I have that have some wildlife, and I'm wondering, tell me about the value of elk in the last 6 months, what's happened to the value of elk standing in a pasture. Tell me about the value of elk in the last 6 months, what's happened to the value of elk standing in a pasture. Has that changed, and why has that changed, or if it's changed, why?
I think without a doubt it's changed. I don't blame any one faction for the devaluation of that animal, but definitely it's happened. First thing, the fear of being able to comply with government regulations hit them. And understand, this is almost like two different islands that occur in the Caribbean. There can be different animals, different issues on those islands. The elk issue is so different than the deer issue because of how deer or cervids are confined, and I'm talking about permitted cervids versus elk. And so what happened, we had, instead of a small island to be able to regulate, we had 5 different issues that we were trying to put tags on. And in the interim, the producer, without a doubt, this is going to affect commerce, and I think Dr. Ellis touched on this, and I'd like to tell you different, but it didn't. You don't see many of them coming through the sale anymore, and they're going to be sold different ways. And there's going to be some that are complying, some aren't going to comply. But without a doubt, I think it has devalued the elk business. And I'm sad about that, and I hope that I can come back soon to y'all to be able to tweak it, to loosen it up a little more, to help commerce move again. It might even be that you may see the majority of the elk coming into this play in this industry may come from out of state now. And that's sad for Texas to have to assume that, but this is all kind of a program that had to happen, and we just had no choice.
Charlie's shaking his head. He might. Did you want to make a comment about the same question? I'm kind of throwing it out.
Dr. Edmondson, Warren is exactly right. What has happened is there's a new gold rush right now in the northern states with elk. The velvet market is back up again. Venison market's back up again. Texas has pretty much quit the elk industry, and I think that's probably proof by the amount of premise IDs and people that have signed up for the monitoring program. It's easier for us as producers and my members to bring elk in from other states than it is because of our commission's attitude toward protocol. It's easier for us to bring in elk than it is to grow them ourselves and move them around within the state. So the elk industry pretty much is done in Texas for the most part. There's still a few that have them, but intrastate movement is pretty much over.
Warren, I've got a question. A few years ago, the Asian community in Houston were buying those horns in velvet and paying an astronomical amount of money for it. Is that gone?
No,
Did it stop working for them, or what?
Well, the difficulty. What do they call it? Aphrodisiac?
I don't know, but I had a producer that had a big herd that was harvesting those horns, and
well, part of this has to do with change and reorganization and re-administration. So I don't think it's going to totally kill it. I think there will be a reorganization period, and there will be a tough period. But remember, we've got a couple of elk populations in Texas. One's free-ranging in the Trans-Pecos that we have no control over. And we have people that want to capture them and put them somewhere and move them. And anytime you instill movement, you instill risk with diseases. So we have so many different factions of how these elk are held, and I'll give you an example. You have a high fence ranch, like one of my ranches is 5,000 acres, and they've got elk on it. And to try to inventory that is absolutely impossible. One of the big questions that kept coming up for all of us was how many elk are there actually, and where and how are they held? And none of us within relativity could give those accurate figures. We could estimate, and we did the best we could. Yes, Dee?
Well, I was going to say, you know, we'll reconvene that group at any time. We're committed to reevaluating our rules if there's a better way to do it. And just ask you a question for either one of y'all. When the federal rules come out, and you've got some channels we don't, do you see the federal rules probably influencing that need to reevaluate our CWD surveillance system for elk, or are you just wanting to do it for business reasons, or both? What are your thoughts on that?
I will tell you my feelings. This is like your cookbook.
Yeah, I missed that. I like cookbooks.
I started at the infancy of the CWD panic states, and so did he, and we relied on the federal government through hundreds and hundreds of dollars that we spent traveling to get that rule in effect for us. So if they walked in here today with a suitcase and said the rule was done, I would sit them down on the floor with our attorney and my attorney to make sure that's happened. I can't wait on them any longer. They disappointed us so many times because of politics, and that rule is up there right now, somewhere in somebody's box, but they won't turn it loose because of states' rights. And so we're stalled again. We waited for that program, and yes, Dee, I think it could influence it. But I look at Texas as now moving ahead and trying to do something with insanity. We just can't wait on them any longer. Charlie, you might want to add to that.
One of the main things I think has been the taking away of the indemnity for the money. In other words, for the CWD testing, as well as, I mean, it's costing the producer. We went from $50 a test. It's now costing somewhere around $150, and more. And some of us are paying more than that. That's what's killing I think a lot of the monitoring and the things that we're seeing right now going on in Texas, and I think that's going to have a lot to do with producers pulling away from animal health, going over to Parks and Wildlife for their CWD monitoring to be movement qualified. Especially with the whitetails, what I'm talking about there is because of the cost of testing.
Yes, Andy.
I could offer a comment. I appreciate these two gentlemen taking the time, to come today, and they know the industry far better than I do. But I just want to make sure everyone understands that elk coming into Texas have to have either a 3 or 5 year monitor status, which is far more than what we're asking our Texas elk producers to do. So even though they're coming into the state, apparently there's a market shift there. They have to they're held to a higher standard.
But those people in the north have been doing this since day one, and that's the whole thing. I mean, we've put this on our producers within the state, and this is all new to them. So that's why, and that's what I mentioned a while ago, that we're fortunate with this commission that they have recognized protocol, even coming from some of the CWD endemic areas. Dr. Ellis's predecessor was very staunch about saying if we meet protocol, I don't care where they're at, I don't care if CWD's right next to them, if they meet protocol, they're coming, because that's why we have protocol.
And
saying if we meet protocol, I don't care where they're at, I don't care if CWD's right next to them, if they meet protocol, they're coming, because that's why we have protocol.
And just to touch on your comment, and Charlie's comment a little bit more, so that y'all make sure that you understand the difficulty in getting these herds to that status level because of how herds are held in Texas are very, very difficult, because you can't get to status without inventoried herds and accurate inventory herds. And so in Texas, you can tell me, I can tell you where they're at in subdivisions, I can tell you where they're free ranging, I can tell you on high fence, I can tell you in low fence. And to try to get that encompassed is difficult, and that was a challenge that we all faced for month after month trying to get this in place. And so I think the message now, you understand the complexity, and I appreciate y'all working with us, and thank you to everybody that did. And I'm looking forward to coming back to you soon, because I think I'm probably going to have to.
Our doors are open.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one comment as the chairperson of this and as the industry rep. We've been fighting this fight an awful long time. We certainly have not answered all of the questions, but we have put into place a mechanism that we can progress from. I want to thank the industry for its patience and its diligence to work with us continuously through false starts, steps forward and steps back. You've never grown terribly frustrated with us, nor have we grown terribly frustrated with you. We've been able to continue on, and we've got a workable product. Trust me, you will be getting a call. If you don't call us pretty quick, you'll be getting one from us saying, we need to get back together and start working this. Notice we did change the name of that group. It is now a Cervid Health Group. This is not the only issue that needs to be addressed. In the future, we will. I thank you both individually and as representatives of the groups you work for and with. We could not have come up with a product without your help. We've come up with a decent product. We will make it better. Thank you. Keep working with us. We'll keep working with you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Does Parks and Wildlife biologists pull brain stems on these harvested elk?
I don't know the answer to that. Y'all know?
Well, in the industry, it is pulled two ways. If it's a free range and Triple T operation, the owner can pull them. But if it's captive under permitted facilities, they have to go to a veterinarian for a veterinarian's extraction. And the reason for that is trackability and nothing going on. Credibility. And the question has come up to both Charlie and I know we're taking a lot of your time, but I do think this is important. Why elk producers can't pull their own brain stems. We're getting there. And that's something that I think our working group will probably discuss with your permission in the next working group.
See, other states right now allow they're working toward that, to allow their producers to pull the brain stems and the lymph nodes. So,
does the federal rule that's proposed address that?
You know, I don't know. Nobody will let us know what's in there. I don't think so, Doc. I don't believe it will.
They won't tell us what's in.
But I was thinking for intrastate movement, and I know this is a matter for another day. But
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion?
Do we need to, if we put the motion as placed here, does it take care of the?
Well, just to make sure that you concur with the comment and recommendation that we go with the graduated fee scale as provided in the book. With that motion that we discussed today, we will add that, we'll make the change and add that.
Because ours are on the max right now.
Yeah, we just put the $100, but at this point, it's, from what I can tell from our discussion and stuff, of course, that would be, I include that as part of, that's what's discussed today, if you're okay with us putting in.
I think the graduated sample
graduated
yeah,
that takes care of it as
very
discussed.
fair.
Yeah, it's discussed.
As discussed today.
I'm not seeing any disagreements with the.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt amendments to Chapter 33 fees, herd certification located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today.
I'll second.
Graduated scales.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the amendments to Chapter 33 fees, herd certification located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today. Is there any further discussion? If none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We have, the previous meeting, we discussed market ID. We considered and actually passed regulation to be, I'm losing my train of thought. We have proposed regulation. As chairman, we did some work behind the scenes, not actually behind the scenes, but with Dr. Ellis, working with industry leadership and maybe trying to go at this particular situation a different way. And with that, I'm going to skip item C because the next possible action for proposed regulations will actually improve, in my opinion, what we tried to do the previous meeting. So with that, if there's no commissioners that would request otherwise, I recommend as chairman that we leave that, don't address that, and move to section 11. Is that okay with the fellow commissioners?
You bet.
If so, we'll move to item 11 and deal with chapter 35, brucellosis change of ownership. We have a couple of comments, Gene, with this, so after you address the commissioners and the public, then we'll deal with those public comments.
Commissioners, as Dr. Ellis indicated today, what we bring to you is a change to our brucellosis change of ownership requirements for two reasons. The first is because this is where we had our test requirement, for which we had language that indicated when we had insufficient funds, we would cease to require it. That, of course, has taken place effective on August 1. So with that, we're cleaning up that chapter to remove that requirement.
Rain.
Wow.
What's that?
No way.
No, the rain now.
I gotta see it to believe.
Yeah, I agree. Anyway, sorry. I didn't mean to, it's been a while since I've heard it that loud. Getting back to it, so we removed with that. With the discussions that came up through the market identification, as well as trying to conceptually, with an equitable fix of anybody with a test eligible cow, requiring that they have an identification on it, which would then put it on everybody who has an animal that fits the criteria and sells it, that they would need to be identified. As such, the modifications were to add that requirement, replacing out the testing requirement. So with that, I refer to the comments.
Okay. First, Judith McGeary with the Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance. Judith? Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. First of all, I very much appreciate y'all rethinking.
Okay. First, Judith McGeary with the Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance. Judith? Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. First of all, I very much appreciate y'all rethinking the market rule and coming back with a new proposal. I hadn't seen it before, so I'll have to take it back to my members and see what they say, but really appreciate you taking people's comments into consideration and taking a new approach. Just looking at the new approach, I have one concern that carries over from the old one, which is in the fiscal note, the comment that, tags will be provided or paid for by USDA under the new ADT rule. I am actually vice chair of the USDA Secretary's Advisory Committee on Animal Health. It's obviously an advisory committee, I don't have authority, but I can tell you that the advisory committee is really worried about where the funding is coming from. In all of our conversations with USDA, it is really far from clear that there will be funding for this. The advisory committee has recommended that USDA, if and when it issues a final rule, include a provision that if there isn't funding, the regulatory requirements be suspended. Actually, I stagged it from the olive ID on brucellosis testing. If their money isn't there, then there shouldn't be a regulatory requirement. We don't know what USDA is going to do. We don't know when the final rule will be published. And keep in mind also that the final rule, or as proposed, the federal rule applies to animals going interstate only, not intrastate. So if there's a crunch in funding, there's also a possibility that they will say, fine, we'll pay for anything going interstate, but we won't cover tags for intrastate movement. We just don't know. So I just encourage you, you all are already facing the problem of what happens when USDA funding dries up. I don't need to tell y'all much about that. Keep in mind, this ADT funding is just as much at risk as all the other sources.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Jason Skaggs with Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers also has a comment. Jason, thank you for coming.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. Happy New Year. Commissioner Baumann, welcome. Look forward to working with you. Just a few brief comments. First of all, I want to express our thanks to you all and the Texas Animal Health Commission staff, Dr. Ellis, working on this tagging issue, particularly since your last meeting. We've had a lot of good dialogue with Dr. Ellis, and appreciate he and his staff working with us on that, and all the other industry groups. As Chairman Rowell said, I'm here today representing the Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association. We are still, our board of directors remains very committed to making sure that Texas has a a traceability program, not only at the state level, but at the federal level, that is first and foremost efficient and doesn't slow the speed of commerce, that it's affordable, I think to Judah's point, effective in tracebacks and helping Dr. Ellis and his team and USDA do their job, and also protect producer confidentiality. And I think it could go without saying, we appreciate the opportunity to be involved in that process, and would certainly like for that to continue. We'll obviously be submitting, when this rule gets officially proposed today, we'll be submitting written comments as we did on the prior rule that was proposed. But I think it's important to us and to our board. Our board of directors passed policy both on the national program, supporting that with those caveats and a few others that I laid out, and also most recently at our fall board meeting this past September in Lubbock, our board passed policy supporting a state, the tagging of animals intrastate, with the exception of all those adult cattle, obviously, at all points of ownership, not only at markets, which is why we didn't support the prior rule, but also to encourage the commission to take a look at those animals that are going direct to slaughter, particularly in the time of drought, and some of the cattle that are coming in. And taking a look at that. So those policy directives are on our books from our board's perspective. We think it's critically important that whatever action that this commission takes on a state tagging program work hand in hand and really dovetail in with the ADT federal rule at the appropriate time. We, as Dr. Varner and others know, we're some time away, it seems, from knowing what that rule is going to ultimately look like. We've all, I think, submitted comments to USDA, but we need those to work hand in hand. I think that's really important from a producer's perspective. I mentioned the direct to slaughter issue is still very much an outstanding issue for us. We do have the policy that supports the majority of the rule as it's proposed, but we do have that issue that still remains. We also have quite a few questions on implementation, logistics, and schedule, and that kind of thing that I think we really look forward to working on as we move into adoption of this rule and even after that. We would consider or recommend prior or in your consideration today proposing there's a 30-day comment period. We would propose that you consider a 60-day comment period to allow some of these issues to be discussed and allow adequate time to some of the industry leaders to get together to talk about some of these things like we've done with Dr. Ellis and his staff up to this point, and maybe continue some of those discussions as we move forward with the industry representatives to work out some of those issues, so we know appropriately how to comment on what we're commenting on prior to the final adoption at your next meeting, I presume. So with that, those are my comments, and certainly be glad to answer any questions.
Well, I have no problem with extending the comment period to 60 days, and hopefully that will be in the motion as the motion is presented.
Thank you.
Any questions for Jason? Thanks, Jason. Are there any comments from any commissioners?
Yes.
Ken?
On this vote, and I talked to you earlier about it, I'm going to be abstaining from this. Basically, at this point, is basically exactly what Jason commented on, some of the logistic issues.
Thank you.
Any questions for Jason? Thanks, Jason. Are there any comments from any commissioners?
Yes.
Ken?
On this vote, and I talked to you earlier about it, I'm going to be abstaining from this. Basically, at this point, is basically exactly what Jason commented on, some of the logistic issues, some of those that still need to be discussed come out. Also the going direct to slaughter, those issues. It's not that our industry is, I think, not for some ID or some identification. I think we're closer here than we were, but there's some of these issues that are pretty important that need to be worked out. So at this time, I'm going to be abstaining on this issue at this time.
And I appreciate that comment, and it's very well taken, and and livestock markets are always active and involved in our discussions and in formulating these regulations, and I hope that continues. So, Ernie D.
Are there any other comments?
There are no other comments that have been requested.
I'll give you my thoughts if you'd like.
Yes.
For a second. Obviously, we welcome the opportunity to meet again with industry leaders. I think, we had a good meeting at TSCRA office in October and had a conference call last summer, and I don't know that we'll ever agree on everything, but truthfully, we can continue to try and find a feasible solution. The intent of the rule is better traceability. That won't come without a cost, obviously, if you decide to do that. It also is going to bring business continuity into play, not only for the cattle industry, but the sale barns. If you don't have a traceability system and we get a catastrophic disease, the markets are going to be closed, and they're going to be closed a long, long time. So this is really, we've had discussions with Poultry Federation on business continuity and the pork producers and some other industries. We've never really talked to the market folks per se, but in my opinion, this is your insurance policy that you're not put out of business for 5 years, maybe only 1 year, if we have a foot and mouth disease outbreak in Texas or some other disease. The concept will dovetail with ADT, but it's a separate concept in my mind. This is better than the national proposed rule. It's similar to the sheep scrapie rule. It'll fit in with the dairy ID that we're already working very well with. The slaughter issue is obviously the 800-pound gorilla that I don't know if we'll solve it, but let's talk about it some more. My concern, as state vet, my concern is managing my field and the ability to enforce it. You heard the compliance case we just had on a guy that consigned animals as slaughter animals at the market and then came back and changed his mind after the fact 2 times on the same bull, and then we've had 2 cases like that. And so that's the part. How do you figure out how to solve that without implementing a permit system? If we're going to have a permit system and without the agency's authority to file Class C misdemeanors on these people easily, we don't have the staff to do administrative hearings, and so you end up without that and without a permit system, you have an unenforceable rule and an untenable situation for our employees at a market. We'll continue to talk about it, and again, in my mind, as state vet, I recommend this. If y'all choose to do something differently, we will do whatever, but this is a good traceability system for the cattle industry that I recommend that we continue to explore, and we hope to find a solution. But I'll just tell you up front, I don't know that I can solve the slaughter issue. I'm not sure we can solve that, but we'll talk about it.
Okay.
I wonder if Jason would be willing to utilize his brand inspector force to apply the identification tag to these cattle, right?
You'd have to talk to the board of directors.
I will say that, the funding for the tags, Veterinary Service has agreed tentatively to give us funding now for free test tags. The dairy tags are free. They're not linked to the ADT rule. I don't know if the ADT rule will ever be passed. We don't know if that'll ever happen. Maybe like the CWD rule. It may die from old age at some point. We have no clue what the federal funds are for any program right now, and if we based all our decisions on the potential for funds rather than what's the best interest of the industries involved, we probably wouldn't get anywhere because of the lack of knowledge of USDA intent. We know at least for the next few years we'll get free metal tags. Are they the best tag? Absolutely not. I hope, at some point you're going to have to go to RFID tags just because technology hopefully will improve to where it's cost efficient and the speed of commerce comes together, and whether it's a sheep tag or a dairy tag or a beef tag or a deer tag, I think, in 10 or 20 years we won't even be talking about these metal tags. So I don't know that I can can solve the concerns about funding for USDA, but at least in the short term, we've been told they're going to give us free tags, and we'll figure out a way to distribute them to beef folks, just like we do the dairy folks right now, if you choose to pass this rule.
Okay. I appreciate that, Dr. Ellis, and I would ask that if the motion is presented, that whoever presents the motion within the first reading change from 30-day to 60-day on the comment period.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I move that we propose the amendment to Chapter 35 of brucellosis located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today. I further move that notice of the proposed amendments be published in the Texas Register with a 60-day comment period.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we propose the amendments to Chapter 35, brucellosis, located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code, as discussed today. It's further moved and seconded that notice of proposed amendments be published in the Texas Register with a 60-day comment period. Is there any further discussion?
When do we refine the protocol on that, Ernie, as far as who applies the tag and who?
That's going to be worked out when we're going to have the discussion. We're going to have the comment period, and during that comment period, our staff, certain commissioners who choose to be involved, and industry, key industry that is involved in this whole situation will work through those things. Any further discussion? None. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And be noted for the record that Commissioner Jordan has abstained from this vote. Thank you. And Gene, Section 11, Item B, entry requirements.
All right, Commissioners, I'll bring you the last rule proposal for the day. This involves our entry requirements. Frankly, it's cleanup on a number of different things. The first one is we're providing for an exception to the certificate of veterinary inspection on our entry permits for swine consigned from out of state to a livestock market that is actually a validated herd. We have, this basically was an issue, we have a number of Oklahoma that are swine herds that are validated, which means they are disease monitored, just like our certification process, which do the fees. They come and they sell them in Texas. They don't have a vet anywhere near there. But because we have not had an exception for it previously, we've been asking for the health certificate. However, as a matter of disease protocols, it makes sense if we have on file their actual validated herd status in Oklahoma. As such, we're trying to address that and allow them to come in without a certificate of veterinary inspection. We actually, if you will see on the next page, we actually had an exception for the entry permit, so I'm just moving it over and making it for both the entry permit and their certificate of veterinary inspection. The second change is regarding vesicular stomatitis, and this is an issue I think that has some politics, because as you're well aware, we do have little outbreaks of this for which no matter where it takes place in Texas, be it El Paso or Brownsville, the whole state finds itself needing to write on a health certificate that they have not been next to a premise. I think with Dr. Ellis is having dealt with this a number of times, he thought that it was time that we just go ahead and recognize the fact that if you're not coming from a quarantine premise, but you're coming from a state where there was an outbreak, that this is not necessarily necessary.
This is just, partially Dr. Swartz and myself's 25 or 30 years of experience in dealing with VS. It's not. We were having more problems with the regulations and where the disease, and especially with slaughter animals, because right now, slaughter cattle coming from New Mexico would have to have a health certificate that said this statement on it that they didn't come from a VS infected or quarantined area, and we just acknowledging that the disease is not that contagious and it's sporadic, and the epidemiology never figures out how, there's some thoughts it's an insect disease or a plant virus. They don't even know what happens and what pops up. Basically, we're just going to trust the other states' infrastructure. If they have a quarantine or quarantine area, those animals can't come without meeting our entry requirements, but we're waiving the statement and the need for a health certificate on all animals in a state when there's one case somewhere remote, as usually the case. And it's because in the past times that we've had to just basically either enforce or not enforce our rule, which none of us thought was warranted from a veterinary standpoint. So we're asking to relieve the requirement for the statement that any cow, bull, horse, sheep, llama, camel, whatever from New Mexico has to have a statement, because you got one horse down in New Mexico in a river bottom that has this VS that we don't even know how they got it, and it never seems to spread. So it's kind of a common sense, pragmatic suggestion, and talking with some of the other state vets, and specifically Dave Fly in New Mexico, they're going to probably mimic this. And basically, this is a disease. The disease is costing us more trouble than under the regulations than the disease, and so we want to try and give some relief for interstate movement, and that's why.
Pragmatic approach. The last thing is we're for swine coming in, it's required on a health certificate that they've been exposed to hog cholera. Hog cholera has been eradicated, so we're removing it because it doesn't make sense to look at. It won't require that anymore for that declaration. So that's what I have.
Okay, we have no public comment, so I ask if there's if there's no other questions, commissioners, we have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we propose amendments to Chapter 51 entry requirements located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today. I further move that notice of proposed amendments be published in Texas Register with a 30-day comment period.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We propose the amendments to Chapter 51 entry requirements located in Title IV of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today. It's further moved. The proposed amendments be published in the Texas Register with a 30-day comment period. Is there any further discussion? If none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Gene. We're to item 12. I would like to say I know that there's several awards that are going to be given forth today. I did sign, and Dr. Ellis signed a certificate of appreciation to Commissioner Dice for her 12 years of dedication to service the Texas Animal Health Commission and the livestock industries of Texas. This will be sent to Commissioner Dice, and I'll personally call her and thank her for her years of service. So I thought I'd make that on public record also. Okay? And Dee, yes, we're ready for you.
Tag teaming on this.
Okay.
And I want to ask Howard Helmers to come up. And Richard Wagner and I are both going to speak on behalf of Howard. And he's one of our most valued employees. I started to say special, but that wouldn't come across. But Howard is our supervising inspector in the Beeville region, and he's been with us since the 1988. And the reason I'm up here is that I hired Howard back when I was a regional director in Rockdale, and it was under an unfortunate situation. We had an inspector that committed suicide, a really good guy. And we hired Howard, and we thought, man, how will we ever replace that other fellow? Well, of course, personally, we couldn't, but as an employee and as a dedicated public servant, Howard far exceeded our expectations. He's a great guy, and I think Richard Wagner is going to give you some more personal insight, but I just want to tell you how proud I have been to work with Howard. He's been a first responder and been very involved in the poultry industry over the years and some of those things, and has done whatever we've asked him. And Howard's one of the good luck stories. He, as the Beverly Hillbillies song goes, he hit some bowling crude, and so he couldn't happen to a better guy, and we want to wish him all the success. And I just want to personally thank you for all your dedication working with me and then other parts of the state. And we just promoted him to management, and we're going to miss him. We don't want him to leave, but I understand why he's going. So Richard, come on up and you can say something as well, but I just wanted to personally tell you all how proud I am to have worked with Howard over the last 25 years.
Well, this is going to be a little, some of this will be redundant, what Dr. Ellis said, but it's all true. I said, he's been introduced, and a lot of y'all in this room, staff, and y'all know him as our supervising inspector in Region 5 Beeville office. And he's been there for a year and a half, approximately. When Howard took that position, moving out of the old Area 8, Region 8, he walked into real serious personnel and morale issues down there in South Texas with staff, ongoing fever tick battle, pyroplasmosis, and hopefully the last brucellosis infected herd in the state. You know, and he was a rookie supervisor. He walked in the middle of all that. He handled all of it very professionally. Every problem that was thrown at him, he handled the best of character and professionalism. But personally, I want to tell you all about Howard Helmers before he was a supervising inspector. 20-something years ago, Howard and I were inspectors together down in Area 8, old Area 8, or even then it was Area 10. I mean, changes we've seen. 8.5 years of that time frame, I was a supervising inspector down there. I hope I wasn't too bad a boss. I never had any problems with Howard. But most importantly, I'm proud to call him a friend. As Dr. Ellis mentioned, Howard's been an agency first responder going back to the 98 Guadalupe River flood. And emergency management's a big deal nowadays for this agency and everybody. We didn't have a clue, did we? There was just water everywhere. And as some of y'all are aware, the Guadalupe River between Gonzales and Cuero in spots was 5 miles wide for several weeks. And Howard, living in Victoria County, he just showed up at the Emergency Command Center, Operations Center. Anything I can do to help, we'll do. So that was our baptism by fire, if you will, for emergency management. He's been on every poultry disease outbreak situation for the last 13, 14 years, I guess, since 99 probably, or more than that. And he's been a responder for Hurricane Dolly and Hurricane Ike. And Ike was a big deal. Howard was a team leader, or what did they call you, in Galveston County. Stayed up till 4 o'clock in the morning writing reports a lot of nights. But so, whenever and wherever the Animal Health Commission needed Howard to go, he was more than willing to pack up and go, and did more often than not. I don't really ever said no. He's been from the Panhandle to Brownsville, Sabine River to El Paso, service of the Animal Health Commission in the state of Texas. We used to say in Area 8 that the worst thing to give Howard Helmers was a pat on the back, because he just worked that much harder. You could kill him by giving him good recommendations. One example, him and another inspector were, you and Dickie were in Calhoun County bleeding calves, and it started raining. And it rained, and it rained, and it rained. They kept bleeding cows, and Brucellosis herd test. They kept bleeding cows in the rain all day. It rained so much that they had to close the roads. They were trapped. They couldn't get home. They made it as far as Port Lavaca, got a motel room, spent the night, got up the next morning, put those wet clothes back on, and went back and finished the herd test. I couldn't even get help to them. I couldn't get anybody down there to relieve them because the roads were all closed. So that's the kind of people that the Animal Health Commission has.
I got some cows to bleed, Howard. Can you come?
But, and also, as much as Howard believes in and loves the Animal Health Commission, he cares more about his family. And again, as Dr. Ellis mentioned, he's been personally blessed recently. So Howard's going to become a full-time family man to his wife Beverly and his son Joshua. Imagine go back into some leather work, doing leather work, and, whatever he wants to, basically. But don't think he's abandoned THC, just walked out the door. He didn't decide to do all this till he had a good replacement, on board, and was going to take replacement, on board, and was going to take the time to train, which he's going to get a couple of weeks to get Bart started, and going to have an experienced regional director to fill in behind him. So he's leaving it in good hands. Howard, we've got a couple of things here for you. This is a Texas flag that's flown over the Capitol. And a plaque of appreciation.
Hold on.
I know we all
Well, all I can say is it's been an honor and a privilege to serve the livestock and poultry industry of the state of Texas for the last 23 and a half years as a part of this vital and important agency. And I thank everyone for allowing me to do that.
Dr. Ellis, do we have any more?
I forgot to mention one thing.
Okay.
I want to brag on Bonnie. She started, it's not finished. I'll take a little bit of the credit for the idea until it becomes a problem, and it was Bonnie's idea. But we're starting to put together, I don't want to call it a museum yet, but memorabilia of the agency. And I think it can grow from here. And we started over here, and we've moved into this bigger thing. I want y'all to stop and take a look at some of the stuff there. If you guys have any ideas What I'd really love to bring is a big wooden head gate they used to carry on top of their car to bleed cows in the neck, but I don't know where they're at. But we're going to continue to expand agency memorabilia. A lot of it is brucellosis stuff, but it could be any poultry response stuff. We've got a couple of employees that have died in the line of duty. We're going to put their pictures up here by the next commission. Wilbur Kubitschek died in El Paso during our E&D outbreak, and we've got a couple of other inspectors that have. So we're gonna make the room a little more, give a little homage to the folks that have come and gone, people like Howard, because they're the heart and soul of this agency. And so I just wanted to brag on Bonnie and some of the other staff for working on this so far, what they've done, and we're going to continue to grow that until it becomes a problem. And I don't have, it wasn't my idea. If y'all have thoughts, please let us know. And other than that, Chairman, I'm finished. Need to talk about the next date, right?
Okay. Well, before that, under item 13, public comment, Judith wants to address the commission and one more issue under this public comment. Judith?
I'll keep it very brief. It's been a long morning, I know. I just wanted to let y'all know, the Secretary's Advisory Committee on Animal Health has been very focused on the animal ID issue, but we have another year and we're going to be working on several issues that I thought might be of interest to members of this commission. One of the first and foremost that is important for me is the response to foot and mouth disease. The USDA's policy has for many years been basically mass depopulation. If it came to this country, we're going to do kill circles until it's gone, end of statement. USDA is seriously reconsidering this, and I apologize if this has been discussed. I missed a few meetings, so my apologies if I'm repeating things you've heard. But they're doing a lot of outreach, they're doing a lot of stakeholder meetings to talk about what are the options besides mass depopulation. And they are also starting to try to outreach to more small-scale holders, disadvantaged farmers, organic farmers, trying to make it a more encompassing project. So first of all, I wanted to let y'all know about that if you didn't already. Please encourage you or the people you represent to get involved in these discussions. And also hope that this agency starts also doing similar outreach towards the smaller scale producers more as we work on these sorts of issues. Another issue that the committee hopes to work on in the coming year, and this all depends, of course, on the committee being able to do anything because budgets are being cut, so we'll have to see what happens. But as part of our recommendations on the animal disease traceability rule, we recommended that the agency not put any new regulatory requirements on poultry, but that they do focus more on outreach to, again, small-scale poultry producers. This is a huge, fast-growing market for backyard poultry and small-scale poultry. I love it. I know some people don't. Whether you love it or you don't love it, it's here to stay and it's growing. And again, I'd welcome cooperation with y'all and working with any individual members or the commission as a whole on how to improve outreach to small-scale poultry producers on the resources that are available. That's the big gap that we've talked about, is how many small-scale poultry producers just don't even know where to go for information or resources. So look forward to working with y'all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judith. Before we move to set the 383rd meeting, I do want to make one comment as far as recognition. I had the honor of serving with Commissioner Winters' father, Dr. Winters, in the 90s. We lost him last year, late last year, and I just want you to know that his service and dedication to the commission won't be forgotten.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I appreciate it. Dad was so honored and pleased to be able to serve the state in the capacity as a commissioner, and it truly was always one of the highlights of what had been a very distinguished career. And up until the very end, he never had a commission meeting come by that I was not instructed to make sure everybody got a good hello from Doc. So thank you very much.
Okay. Our next meeting date, we just going to get an email out to everybody and look, or do we have some projected dates that we can look at right now?
We got to add 60 days plus the time. I don't know, Gene, what's the time before and after that? That's going to,
it'll be
late May at the earliest?
February. I mean, it takes 2 to 3 weeks to actually publish it, which clicks the clock. So you're looking at the first, second week of February. So if you were to escalate it out, that would put you mid-April for the comment period. Plus, I will say, depending on how, as you can see, I got quite a few comments in the last one for which just responding and working with them and stuff.
So May.
Can we look at sometime mid-May, we'll get some dates out?
Maybe the 22nd is a possibility. That's a Tuesday. You want a Tuesday, right?
Yes.
So I would say maybe that's the first choice, looking at our schedule.
Maybe throw the 15th and the 22nd out there and get some comment from the commissioners.
I can change it if I have to. That's fine.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. If there's nothing else, then I declare the 382nd meeting of the Texas Animal Health Commission adjourned. Thank you.
Get over St. Louis.